I'll keep the narration in voice and begin the first portion now, with no headings or recap text inside the script. Tonight, we step into the dusty upper room of a 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter, just before the first screen begins to hum. Settle in and let the pace of the work become slow. The floorboards hold the night's coolness, and the bins wait in the dim light. You can smell burlap, seed dust, machine oil, and the faint river damp that comes up from Peoria before dawn. We stand beside the bolter, the man whose job is to sift, clean, and sort what others have harvested. Few recall the 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter now, though his hands once knew every tremor of the mill. The room is not grand, and it never asks to be remembered. It has a low ceiling, high windows, and belts that hang like dark ribbons from the shafting overhead. You hear them before they move, because the building itself seems to be listening. Somewhere below, a door opens, and the cold air carries in the smell of coal smoke and wet wood. The bolter arrives with his lunch wrapped in paper, his cap low, and his coat powdered from yesterday's work. You can imagine him pausing near the stairs, not from drama, but from habit. A seed mill begins in layers. First, the sweep of a broom, then the scrape of a bin gate, then the cough of the motor, and then the soft, dry rush of seed finding its path. In Peoria in the 1930s, the river and the rail lines made a patient kind of crossroads. Corn country spread outward in every direction, but the city held warehouses, feed stores, hardware counters, small mills, and offices where orders were written in careful pencil. We are not in the loudest factory. We are in a quieter place, where clover seed, timothy seed, oats, grass seed, and small lots from nearby farms pass through screens and air. The bolter's work begins with looking. You look into the sacks before you lift them, because every lot has its own character. Some seed is pale and clean, with only a little straw mixed through it. Some arrives with dust, weed seed, broken stems, and bits of pod that catch on the fingers like dry paper. The first sack is heavy in an uneven way, slumping against your thigh as you set it near the hopper. Burlap rubs the wrist. Twine bites lightly under the thumb. When the knot loosens, the mouth of the sack opens with a soft sigh, and the smell rises, field dry and faintly sweet, as if the summer has been folded away in a coarse brown cloth. We guide the seed into the hopper slowly, because haste only makes trouble. Too much at once, and the screen blinds over. Too little, and the machine chatters in an empty, useless way. The bolter learns the middle pace, the small controlled pour, the angle of the sack, the sound that tells him the flow is even. The bolting machine is simple to describe and patient to master. Inside, screens separate seed by size and shape, while air may lift away lighter chaff and dust. The good seed travels one way, the screenings fall another. The job is to notice when the separation stops being clean and to correct it before a whole lot is spoiled by carelessness. There is a crank, a brush, a screen frame, a spout, a gate, and a row of boxes placed where gravity does its plain work. You feel each piece through your hands, even when you are not touching it. The frame shakes in a steady rhythm. Fine dust settles on your cuffs. A dry ticking sound comes from seeds striking metal, thousands of tiny taps blending into one gentle noise. And as the morning gains its grey light, we move from opening the mill to tending the first full run of the day. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter stands close enough to the machine to hear its smallest change, but not so close that the dust fills his lungs too quickly. You stand with him near the side rail, where the floor has been worn smooth by years of boots. The windows face a pale industrial morning. Outside, a wagon may pass, or a truck with wooden sides, and farther off, a train coupler knocks with a hollow iron sound. The work asks for attention, but not excitement. You watch the seed cross the screen, shaking in a thin layer that gleams when the light catches it. Good seed moves like a living surface, not quite liquid, not quite sand. Chaff hesitates and gathers. Small stones make a sharper click. Weed seed, if you know it well, shows itself by shape, color, and the way it refuses to behave like the crop. We might think the bolter only feeds a machine, but that misses the quiet skill. He chooses screens, judges flow, clears blockages, and keeps lots separate so one farmer's order does not mingle with another. He knows that clover differs from timothy and that grass seed can carry light husks that drift in the air. He knows that a screen too fine can steal value, while a screen too open lets trouble pass through. His fingers become a kind of measuring tool. He rubs a pinch between thumb and forefinger, feeling roughness, dampness, and broken hulls. He lifts a handful close to the window. We see him tilt his palm, letting the seed roll in a shallow crescent, watching for dark flecks or pale fragments. There is nothing theatrical about it. It is the old pleasure of knowing what you are holding. The room warms by degrees. At first your breath nearly shows in the air, and the metal handles feel cold enough to wake the hand. Then the motor's heat rises. The belts move continuously. Dust touches the back of the throat with a dry taste, and someone below may start coffee on a small stove, sending up a smell that is bitter, warm, and human. By mid-morning, the bolter's coat is open, and the first bags of cleaned seed begin to stand in a row. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the 1930s does not work alone, though his task can feel solitary. Beneath him, a clerk weighs orders and writes names on tags. Near the receiving door, another man handles sacks from farm wagons, reading stitched labels, chalk marks, or notes tied beneath string. We move among them quietly, because the mill is a place of repeated gestures, and each gesture has already been practiced by yesterday. A seed lot has a small biography. It may come from a farm outside the city, from a dealer, or from a grower who wants it cleaned before spring planting. It carries field dust, barn dust, and the smell of storage. Sometimes it carries the faint scent of mice, damp boards, or old straw. The bolter does not scold the sack for what it brings. He simply reads it, as calmly as you might read weather in a window. At the scale, iron weights slide and settle. The beam trembles, rises, and balances. Paper tags are tied with string, and the pencil point leaves a dark groove where the writer presses too hard. You hear the scratch of it beneath the mill's hum. You see the black smudge on the clerk's finger and the little patch of shine on the counter where many elbows have rested. The bolter depends on those tags. If the wrong sack reaches his hopper, the whole day becomes confused. So he checks, and we check with him, reading the name, the kind of seed, the weight, and the mark that tells where the cleaned lot should go. The habit is quiet, almost tender. It is a way of keeping faith with strangers. In the 1930s, when money was tight and waste felt heavier than usual, clean seed mattered. A poor stand in a field could mean thin pasture, poor hay, or more work later. The bolter did not decide the weather, or the market, or the harvest. Still, in his small upper room, he guarded the chance that a handful of seed might do what it was meant to do. There is comfort in a task with boundaries. You cannot mend the whole year. You can adjust the gate. You can clean the screen. You can keep the sacks in order, sweep the spilled seed, and leave the floor better than you found it. That is not a small thing, when the world outside feels uncertain and large. When the bell from a nearby shop or church marks the noon hour, the mill does not stop all at once, but it begins to soften around the edges. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter eats where he can, often near a window or beside a stack of empty sacks. His lunch is plain, wrapped to keep out dust, though dust finds nearly everything. You sit with him on a wooden crate, feeling the grain of it through your trousers, while the machine winds down and the room keeps vibrating for a few moments after the belts have slowed. There may be bread, cheese, a hard-boiled egg, an apple, or a little meat folded between slices from home. The paper crackles. Coffee, if he has it, tastes faintly of tin from the pail. His hands are washed, but not perfectly clean, because seed dust sits in the creases around the nails and makes a pale map of the knuckles. At noon, the mill has another sound. Without the bolter running, you hear the building breathe. A pipe knocks softly. A truck passes outside and fades. Somewhere downstairs, men talk in short, familiar phrases, not because they have nothing to say, but because the day has taught them economy. The smell of oil remains, mixed now with lunch, wool, leather, and the warm, dry scent of grain. This is where memory becomes thin. Jobs like this rarely leave portraits. The owner's name might appear in a directory. The company's advertisement might survive in an old paper. But the bolter may be listed only as labourer, mill hand, cleaner, or nothing at all. He is remembered by the work, and then the work changes. And then even the word bolter begins to sound like it belongs to another room. We stay with him because forgetting often happens to useful people first. Their work is not marked by monuments, but by things that grew afterward. A cleaner seed lot becomes a field becomes feed, hay, pasture, or another crop. The bolter's park disappears into green rows, into the ordinary success of seed taking root. After lunch, the light through the high windows shifts, and so does the task before us. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter of the 1930s returns to the machine with slower hands. Not tired exactly, but settled. The afternoon often brings finer work because the easy lots have gone through and the troublesome ones remain. You can see it in the sacks waiting near the wall. Some are stained dark at the bottom. Some sag as if the contents have clumped. Some carry a smell of damp storage that makes the bolter pause before opening them. Moisture is a quiet problem. Seed that is too damp does not flow cleanly, and dust may cling where it should fall away. The bolter pours a little into his palm, presses it, and lets it go. If it holds together too long, he knows to slow the feed. If it falls freely, he listens for the usual rhythm. In this way, judgment lives in small motions. The screen may need changing. You lift the frame with care, because the edges are worn but still awkward, and the wire cloth has to be protected. It smells metallic, dusty, and slightly sharp. A brush clears lodged bits from the mesh. The sound is a dry whisper, back and forth, until the openings look clean enough to trust again. Changing a screen is not just a mechanical act, it is a decision. Too fine, and you lose good seed into the screenings. Too coarse, and small weed seed rides along into the clean lot. The bolter knows the cost of both errors. He may not use grand language for it, but his body understands balance, and you feel that balance in the way he tightens the frame and checks it twice. Afternoon dust hangs differently in the room. Morning dust rises, but afternoon dust floats in slanting light, visible in a golden haze. It gathers on lashes, sleeves, windowsills, and the rim of a water cup. When you breathe through your nose, you catch the dry smell of hulls, wood, and old paper. It is not unpleasant. It is simply the smell of work that has been ground fine by time. As the afternoon wears on, we begin to notice the screenings, the cast-off material that tells its own quiet story. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter does not ignore what falls away. He watches the waste spout almost as carefully as the clean one. In the screenings box are bits of straw, cracked seed, weed seed, chaff, dust, small stones, and now and then a bright thing that does not belong at all. You might find a nail, a button, a flake of painted wood, or a thread from the sack's old seam. There is a kind of truth in the refuse. It tells where the seed has been, how it was threshed, how it was stored, and whether rain found the roof before the farmer did. The bolter stoops, takes a pinch, and lets it fall back with a soft patter. He is not disgusted by it. He has seen too much ordinary labor to despise what is messy. The waste may be swept, bagged, discarded, or used where it can be used. Nothing in a working mill feels purely abstract. Every pile has weight. Every sweep of the broom makes a sound. Every box has to be lifted, emptied, and set down again. Your shoulders learn the height of the bins, and your boots learn the uneven spots in the floor. The broom is a companion in this work. Its handle is polished by palms, and its straw end has gone uneven from corners and nail heads. You draw it toward you in long strokes, listening to seed tick along the boards. The dust rises in a little cloud, and sunlight catches it briefly, making even waste look soft. Why few recall the bolter has something to do with this. He worked in the middle stage, between field and counter, between farmer and customer, between raw lot and clean seed. People remember the planting, sometimes the harvest, sometimes the company name on the sack. The person who kept the screen from clogging, who noticed the dark flecks, who swept the floor at dusk, slips more easily from the story. but we can hold him here for a while. We can stand beside the bin and hear what he heard. We can feel the small grit on the tongue, the ache in the wrist, the warmth of the motor, and the satisfaction of a clean lot settling into a labeled sack. Remembering in this quiet way is another kind of sorting. When the last difficult lot is nearly through, the day begins to gather itself toward closing. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the 1930s knows the end of a shift by sound before he knows it by the clock. The hopper runs lower. The steady rush thins. The screen's rhythm changes from full to light, and the spout begins to spit small, uneven bursts instead of a continuous stream. You hear that change, and your hand moves almost before thought, easing the gate, then closing it. The final seed in a run is treated carefully. It can be tempting to rush what remains, but the bolter does not do that. He shakes the sack, taps the corners, and guides the last handfuls into the path already chosen for them. The machine has done its work all day, yet it still needs the hand, the eye, and the patient ear. Clean seed drops into the waiting sack with a soft, rounded sound. It is heavier than it looks. When the sack is filled, it settles against your knees like something alive and sleeping. The top is folded, stitched, tied, or tagged according to the shop's habit. The twine pulls rough across the fingers, and the label hangs forward, pale against the burlap. Downstairs, the clerk may check the weight again. The scale rocks, pauses, and steadies. The sack is moved to its row, and for a moment there is order everywhere. Different lots stand apart. Tools lie where they belong. The floor, though never truly clean, has been brought back to a tolerable kind of neatness. Outside, Peoria's evening light touches brick walls, rail tracks, and the river air beyond the warehouses. A factory whistle may sound in the distance. Cars move slowly along the street. Someone laughs near a doorway, and the sound comes up faintly, softened by glass and dust and height. The bolter hears it, but does not turn right away. There is still the cleaning down. A mill does not simply stop. You brush the screen, sweep under the spouts, empty the boxes, and wipe the places where dust would thicken overnight. This last part may seem small, but tomorrow's work depends on it. A dirty screen steals time in the morning. A mislabeled sack steals trust. A careless floor makes every step less certain. And as evening lowers into the upper room, we follow the bolter through the slow closing habits that keep the mill ready for another day. Evening work has a different patience from morning work, because the 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter is no longer asking the machine to perform, but helping it come quietly back to rest. You stand with him near the open side panel, where the air is warmer and the smell of oil is strongest. The belt still moves for a little while, slackening its purpose by degrees. Seed dust lies in the corners like pale flour, and the broom waits against the wall with its worn handle shining in the last light. The first thing is to listen as the machine slows, because a bolter learns even the tired sounds of his own equipment. A bearing may complain in a faint, dry note. A loose guard may tremble after the belt has stopped. The wooden frame may creak once, as if it has carried enough motion for the day. You hear these things with him not as alarms, but as reminders that every useful object asks for a little care. He brushes the screen from the far edge toward the near edge, so the lodged seed comes free without tearing the mesh. The brush is stiff, with bristles darkened by years of dust and oil. Each pass makes a rasping whisper, and a few trapped kernels or grass seeds leap loose and fall into the tray below. You can feel the motion in your shoulder long and even, the way a repeated task becomes a small clock inside the body. A screen is a delicate thing, though it lives inside a rough room. It may be made of wire cloth, punched metal, or a frame suited to the seed being cleaned. It has to endure shaking, brushing, lifting, and the constant passage of grit. Still, one bent patch can change the run, and the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows to examine it in the slant of evening light, where damaged places reveal themselves as little shadows. He lifts the frame just enough to see underneath, not wasting motion, not making a display of strength. You smell old wood as the frame shifts. A line of dust falls from the underside and lands on the floor in a soft, broken stripe. The bolter wipes the rail with a rag from his pocket, and the rag leaves a darker, cleaner mark through the powder. like a finger drawn across a window. By then, the room has begun to cool at the edges, the heat from the motor fades, and the draft near the stairwell returns. Outside, Peoria is taking on the blue-grey color of factories after sunset, when brick, smoke, and river mist seem to fold together. We stay near the machine a while longer, because the day is not finished until the work is ready to be found again tomorrow. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter carries the screenings box to its place, and you feel the weight shift in his arms, uneven and dusty. The contents are not heavy like clean seed, but they are awkward, because chaff settles lightly and stones sink low. When the box is tipped, the material slides and whispers, a dry little weather of stems, cracked hulls, weed seed and powder. It smells of the field after threshing, with a faint bitterness from broken plant matter. He does not throw everything at once. He shakes the corners free, taps the box with his palm, and checks the bottom. Small things hide there, a pebble, a nail, a bean-sized clod of earth, or one bright whole seed that somehow wandered to the wrong side. You can imagine him picking it out and rolling it once between finger and thumb, not because it matters much, but because his eye has been trained by repetition. The sweepings of a seed mill have their own sound under a broom. Dust moves silently, but seed clicks. Straw scratches. A bit of grit drags sharply across the floorboard before it lifts into the pile. The bolter draws everything together, making arcs that overlap, and we follow the broom's slow path as if it were marking the end of the day in circles. Now and then he stops to clear the broom head with his boot. Long fibers of straw catch among the bristles. A thread from burlap clings stubbornly. The sole of his shoe presses down, pulls away, and the broom is ready again. This is the sort of motion no one records, and yet the floor would tell you it happened every evening. The room is never clean in the way a kitchen might be clean, or a parlor, or an office with polished glass. A seed mill is clean when the lots are separated, the dust is controlled, the paths are open, and tomorrow's first sack will not inherit today's careless scraps. We learn that definition beside him. Cleanliness here means readiness, and readiness is a quiet form of respect. When the sweepings are gathered and the screen has been checked, the bolter turns to the sacks waiting for storage or shipment. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter handles each filled sack as if it has a name, because in a practical sense it does. The tag may hold a farmer's surname, a seed kind, a weight, a lot mark, and sometimes a destination written in a hand that leans forward. You stand by the row and see the tags tremble slightly in the draft. The burlap smells warm where the seed has just poured in, and cooler at the folded top. Moving sacks is work that settles into the whole body. You bend at the knees if you have learned to save your back. You hug the sack close, feel its rounded pressure against your chest, and take the few steps to the scale or stack. The floor has old stains, rubbed paths, and nail heads that catch the light. Your boots find the safest route without needing to think about it. A clean seed sack does not stand perfectly straight. It leans, slumps, and settles according to what is inside. Clover may sit differently from oats, and light grass seed has a way of making a sack look larger than its weight. The bolter knows these small differences. He can judge by lift, by sound, by how the sack folds at the corner, and by the way the contents shift under his hands. He ties the mouth with string and makes the knot secure. Not fancy, not decorative. The twine feels dry and a little sharp. If his fingers are cracked from winter or rough from burlap, the string finds those places. Yet the knot holds, and that is what matters. We feel the little pull at the end, the testing motion, the satisfied pause when nothing slips. Downstairs, someone may be locking the front office, closing a ledger, or covering the scale. The smell changes as doors shut. Less street air comes in. The room becomes more itself, full of seed, dust, wood, iron, and cooling oil. In that dimness, the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's work seems both ordinary and strangely tender, because the day's scattered matter has been gathered into order by hand. The ledger may remember the weight, but it rarely remembers the body that moved it. That is one reason few recall this role. Records favor owners, shipments, bills, and names attached to money. The bolter appears only indirectly, in the clean lot, the steady output, the absence of complaint. His success is almost invisible because it looks like nothing going wrong. And when the sacks are lined in their proper places, we follow him towards the smaller tasks that finish the evening. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter has a pocket full of useful things, and none of them would impress a stranger. A stub of pencil, a small knife, a bit of string, perhaps a folded note, a scrap of cloth, or a nail kept because it may serve later. You can hear the faint tap of these objects when he shifts his weight near the workbench. They are the quiet contents of a practical life. The workbench is scarred with cuts, stains, and round marks from oil cans. It has a drawer that resists at first, then opens with a wooden scrape. Inside are brushes, spare tags, a wrench, fragments of twine, and maybe a screen gauge or two, all lying in a familiar disorder that only looks messy to someone who does not work there. The bolter reaches without searching long, because his hands know the place. He wipes the oil can before setting it down. Oil attracts dust, and dust makes paste, and paste makes a machine resentful over time. The rag smells strong, with a dark mineral warmth that clings to the fingers. A drop shines on the metal spout, catching the last light like a small amber bead. You see how even oil has to be used modestly, not poured as if more is always better. There may be a board where screen sizes are marked, or a shelf where frames are stacked according to use. The bolter checks them before leaving. He looks for tears, bent corners, and clogged places that will slow tomorrow's work. We watch him lift one frame and lean it back gently. Dust slides down from the edge and makes a soft line across his sleeve. This is the kind of evening that asks no audience. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter is not performing care. He is practicing it because neglected tools make heavier days. In the 1930s, when replacement parts might cost more than the shop wished to spend, every working man understood the value of keeping what he had in usable order. We can feel that wisdom in the stillness. A machine is not only a machine when it runs. It is also the weighting belt, the brushed screen, the covered hopper, the oiled bearing, and the floor swept clear enough for the next morning's first safe step. The bolter's day ends by making tomorrow less difficult for someone, probably himself. As the lamp is turned lower, the building begins to belong to night rather than work. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter descends the stairs with the sound of his own steps following him down. The stair treads dip a little in the middle. The rail is smooth where many hands have traveled before his. Dust falls from his trousers in faint pale marks, and the air grows cooler as he leaves the upper room. You go with him slowly, hearing the mill settle behind us. At the lower level, the smells are different. There is more street air, more damp from the river, more coal smoke from nearby buildings, and a little trace of ink from the office. The receiving door may still be ajar for a moment, letting in the evening. Peoria outside is not silent, but the sounds are softened by distance. Tires on damp pavement, a cartwheel, a whistle, voices crossing the street. He may stop at a wash basin if one is there and turn a metal tap that complains before giving water. The water is cold enough to sharpen the fingers. Seed dust runs from his hands in grey threads, circling the drain or darkening the ground beneath. Soap has a plain smell, not perfumed, and it lifts some of the day but never all of it. The cuffs remain dusty. The cap remains dusty. The lungs carry their own memory. The bolter looks different after washing, though only slightly. His hands are damp and red from cold water. His hair, where the cap has pressed it, lies flat. The line around his collar is marked by dust. We notice these things because they are the true traces of a job, more honest than any title written in a directory. Someone may say a few words before leaving. Nothing grand. Maybe the name of tomorrow's first lot, a reminder about a screen, a comment about weather, or a quiet complaint about the cold. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter answers in the same plain way. Men who share repeated work often speak in fragments, trusting the day to fill the rest. Their familiarity lives in what does not need saying. Then the door closes, and the mill holds its dark. Outside, the evening has its own texture. Brick walls radiate a little stored chill. The street smells of damp dust, horse leather lingering from older habits, gasoline from newer ones, and the broad, muddy breath of the Illinois River somewhere beyond the buildings. You walk beside him without hurry because a tired worker's pace is steady, not dramatic. The day has used his arms, ears, and attention, and now the city receives him back into its ordinary dark. There might be supper waiting, or a boarding room, or a small house where his clothes will be shaken outside before he steps fully in. Dusty work travels home if you let it. Seed dust can settle on a chair, a sleeve, a bedspread, or the edge of a kitchen table. So he brushes himself at the door, not perfectly, but enough. The habit is practical and perhaps also kind. Why few recall him becomes clearer in the walk home. The visible landmarks belong to others. The mill sign carries the owner's name. The sacks carry the company mark. The street directory names the business, the river, the rail, the dealers, and the larger traffic of trade. The bolter leaves through a side door after the machine is clean, carrying no sign except the dust in his cuffs. And yet, if we are patient, we can follow that dust back to the room where his work remains. The next morning in the Peoria Seed Mill begins before the bolter's hands touch the first sack, because the room has spent the night cooling and settling. You feel the difference as we climb again. The stairs hold the smell of old wood and yesterday's seed. The air near the upper floor is still, dry, and faintly sweet. Even before the motor starts, the place seems arranged around the expectation of motion. Morning light enters in bands, pale at first, then warmer where it finds the dust on the sill. The bolting machine stands with its screen brushed clean, exactly as he left it. This is the reward of evening care. There is no surprise waiting in the frame, no hardened clot of damp seed, no forgotten box under the spout. You can sense the ease that comes from finding your own work done properly. The first few minutes are inspection. He runs his hand along the frame, checks the gate, looks into the hopper, and glances at the sacks in order. He may not think of this as a ritual, but we can hear the ritual in it. Touch, look, listen, lift. The sequence has the quiet rhythm of a person placing himself back inside the day. A co-worker below may start the motor, or the bolter may do it himself, depending on the mill's arrangement. The belt catches with a small shudder, then steadies. The machine begins its familiar vibration. Dust that slept overnight rises slightly. The room changes from stillness into work, and the sound wraps around us like a low, rough blanket. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter does not need to announce the beginning. The machine announces it. The hopper receives the first pour, the screen takes the first shaking layer, and the spouts begin their divided murmurs. We stand near enough to feel the vibration in the floor, as if the building has remembered its purpose. By now, you can hear that there are several kinds of rhythm in the mill. The motor hums continuously. The screen shakes in a shorter pattern. The seed drops in soft pulses. A scoop rings when it touches metal. A sack falls against another sack with a muffled thud. None of these sounds is music exactly, yet together they make a steady company for tired thoughts. As the new day settles into its run, we turn toward the raw seed itself and the long path it took before reaching this upper room. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the 1930s handled seed that had already passed through many hands. Before it reached his screen, someone planted, watched, cut, dried, threshed, gathered, sacked, hauled, and sold it. Each step left a trace. You can feel that history in the roughness of the burlap, in the straw mixed through the lot, and in the field smell that rises when the sack is opened. Clover seed, for example, is small enough to make the hand seem large and clumsy. It slips into creases and hides in seams. Its color may vary from yellow to brown to purple-brown, depending on kind and condition. When you pour it, it has a smooth, small sound, almost like dry rain. The bolter watches it closely because little seed can carry little trouble, and little trouble can travel far. Timothy and grass seeds behave differently. They may be lighter, longer, more fragile. With husks that lift easily in moving air, they cling to dust and to each other. They can bridge in a hopper if fed poorly, making an empty space below and a stubborn arch above. The bolter knows to tap, stir, or slow the feed before the machine complains. You learn with him that every seed has a temperament. Oats or larger grain, when handled in the same shop, brings a fuller sound and a stronger smell. The kernels pour with a heavier rush. Broken bits show plainly. Stones speak more sharply when they strike metal. In the 1930s, a small Peoria mill might handle many such practical tasks, adjusting equipment and habit to what came through the door. The bolter's skill was flexible because the work demanded it. He keeps the lots separate, as if keeping stories from tangling. One farmer's seed may be meant for sale, another's may return to his own fields. A dealer's order may be cleaned for packaging or resale. We stand near the tags and feel the responsibility in plain form. A mixed lot is not a small error to the person depending on it. The smell of each sack changes the room slightly. Dry clover has one warmth. Grass seed has another, lighter and more hay-like. Damp seed gives off a sourness that makes the bolter cautious. Dust from old storage has a stale edge. These smells become knowledge, and knowledge settles into the body until it feels like instinct. By late morning, the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter has touched enough seed that his hands no longer feel clean even when they are dry. Fine particles settle into the cuff seam. A faint grit stays under the thumbnail. The skin at the fingertips becomes sensitive to texture, not in a delicate way, but in a working way. You feel the difference between seed, chaff, and grit before your mind names it. There is a quiet dignity in that kind of knowing. It does not ask to be called expertise, though it is. It belongs to the person who has stood in the same place through many mornings, correcting small errors before others notice them. We can rest in that thought for a while, letting the machine's rhythm carry it gently. And as the raw lots continue to arrive, we follow the path from the receiving door to the bolter's hopper. The receiving door of the Peoria Seed Mill opens onto weather, and in the 1930s that weather comes in with every sack. On wet days, the lower floor smells of mud, wool coats, and damp harness leather from older farm traffic. On dry days, dust follows the wagons and trucks inside. You hear wheels on the street, the scrape of a tailgate, and the solid sound of a sack being dropped to the scale platform. The bolter may not be downstairs for every delivery, but his work begins there in a hidden way. If the sack is torn, he will deal with the loss. If the lot is damp, he will feel it at the screen. If the tag is unclear, he will wait or ask. The receiving room passes its order, or its disorder, upward to him. We learn that no job in a mill is truly isolated. A farmer might stand near the scale, rubbing his hands, watching the weighing more closely than he means to. Seed represents time and risk. It has weather inside it. It has fieldwork inside it. It has the hope of another season inside it. The clerk reads the weight, writes the mark, and perhaps says when the lot may be ready. The bolter's name may not enter the conversation, yet the farmer is depending on him. Upstairs, the sacks arrive by hand, hoist, chute, or plain carrying, depending on the shop's arrangement. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter checks them against the order of the day. A mistaken sequence can make a simple afternoon tangled. He sets one near the hopper, another back by the wall, and a third apart because it carries too much damp or too much foreign matter to be treated casually. You can hear his breathing change when lifting begins. Not strained, just measured. The sack comes up, the shoulder takes its share, the boots shift, and the weight is guided down. Burlap leaves little fibers on his coat. Dust shakes loose and catches in the light. A bit of seed spills from a weak corner, and he bends to gather it because waste, even a handful, is still matter. When he opens a sack, he does so cleanly. The knife slips under the twine. The knot gives way. The top folds back. Sometimes the seed inside is pressed flat from storage, and he breaks the surface with a scoop. Sometimes it runs freely as soon as the mouth is opened. Each lot teaches him its first lesson before entering the machine. There is no rush in this part, though the day may be busy. Rushing at the opening causes trouble later. A bolter who hurries the first pour may spend twice as long clearing a blinded screen or separating what should never have mingled. We stand with him at the hopper and let the pace be what the material requires. And when the seed begins to move through the bolter again, the room returns to its patient division of one thing from another. Inside the Peoria Seed Mill, the bolter's machine makes separation look almost effortless. But we know by now that ease is the result of many small choices. The screen has an angle, the feed has a rate, the brush has a pressure. The air, if used, has a pull that must be strong enough to lift chaff and light enough to leave good seed behind. You feel how judgment lives between too much and too little. The clean seed spout speaks in a steady tone when the run is right. It is a soft pouring sound, full and even, as if the machine has found its breath. The screening spout sounds thinner, more irregular, with little scratches and taps mixed in. The bolter listens to both. He can tell when too much good seed is escaping and when too much waste is traveling where it should not. He takes samples as the run continues. A small scoop, a tin cup, or simply his hand may serve. He catches a little from the clean stream and carries it to the light. The seed lies in his palm with tiny shadows between each piece. He turns it with a fingertip. We look with him for broken bits, for weed seed, for dirt, for the signs that the machine's promise is being kept. Then he checks the screenings. This is where humility enters the work. A person must be willing to examine what he rejects. If too much good seed is there, the machine has been set too harshly. If too little waste is there, perhaps the clean lot is not clean enough. The bolter studies the unwanted pile without impatience, because it tells him what the clean pile cannot. The air near the machine grows warm and active. Dust touches the face. The sound fills the ears until silence later will feel unusually wide. Your hands come to rest on the wooden rail, and you feel the vibration travel through bone. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the 1930s stood in this living hum for hours, while the city outside measured time in errands, trains, and meals. A machine can lull a person, but it can also deceive him. The rhythm is steady, and the mind wants to drift. That is why the bolter builds habits into the day. Check the spout, clear the edge, sample the run, read the tag, sweep the spill. We move through these habits with him, and their repetition becomes a kind of low, useful music. By midday, the work has become less about beginning and more about staying with what has already begun. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's attention in the 1930s is not sharp like a sudden alarm. It is broad and steady, the kind of attention that can hold several quiet facts at once. You know the machine is running well, you know the hopper is half full, you know the clean sack is nearing its mark. You know the screen should be brushed before the next lot. None of this is dramatic, but all of it matters. This is the hour when the body settles deepest into the job. The feet choose their stance. The shoulders find a way to rest even while working. The ears separate useful sounds from background noise. You may feel tired, but the tiredness is familiar, spread evenly through the arms and back, rather than gathered in one sharp place. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter might hum without noticing, or say a word to himself when the gate sticks. He might tap the side of the hopper with 2 fingers, because that is enough. He might glance toward the window when a train passes, not because he is distracted, but because every working day has small permissions for the eye. The train's sound rolls low through the bricks and fades. Outside, the city carries the 1930s in ordinary details. A man in a hat crosses near the warehouse. A delivery truck idles unevenly. Coal smoke softens the roof lines. The river air comes and goes depending on the wind. Inside, seed dust makes the light visible, and the machine keeps sorting the harvest into what will be kept and what will fall away. Lunch comes when the body asks for it, and when the work allows. The bolter may finish a run before stopping, because leaving half a lot in the machine invites confusion. He waits for the last seed, closes the gate, marks the sack, and only then steps back. We can feel the release in that moment, the way the hands hang loose after hours of purposeful motion. The lunch place is not separate from work. It may be a crate, a bench, or the lower step where the air is cooler. Bread tastes slightly of the room, no matter how carefully it was wrapped. Coffee warms the stomach. An apple cuts through the dust with brightness. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter eats slowly, hearing the machine's absence almost as clearly as its sound. Such pauses are part of the job, though they leave no record. A ledger will not say that a man sat with his back to the wall and watched dust settle through a shaft of light. It will not say that his hand smelled of soap, oil, and seed. It will not say that for 10 minutes the whole upper room seemed to float in a stillness earned by labor. And when the meal is finished, the afternoon waits with its finer adjustments and its quieter tests. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter returns to the screen, with the patience of someone who knows the day's second half can be less forgiving than the first. Afternoon lots may be smaller, stranger, or more mixed. They may be the sacks set aside in the morning because they required a different screen or a closer eye. You stand near the wall as he studies the tags, and the light has turned warmer, showing every scuff in the floor. One sack may contain seed from a field that grew too close to weeds. Another may have been stored where dust from other crops sifted through cracks. A third may be good seed but full of broken stems that clogged the screen. The bolter does not complain. He chooses the frame, checks the feed, and lets the material prove itself. The screen change happens with a slow, practiced sequence. Stop the flow, wait for the last seed to clear. Release the frame, lift it level, set it aside where it will not bend. Choose the next one and seat it properly. These steps could be written simply, but in the room they are full of weight, smell, and sound. Metal edges touch wood. Dust slips from corners. A latch clicks home with a small final note. You help him, in imagination, by holding one end of the frame. It is awkward rather than heavy. Your fingers avoid the mesh. The frame has rough places where paint or varnish has worn down. It smells faintly of oil, seed dust, and dry wood warmed by the day. When it settles into place, the bolter tests it with a little pressure, the way someone might test a closed door before leaving. Then the next lot begins. At first he feeds it lightly, allowing the screen to show how it will behave. The seed trembles across the surface. Chaff catches, loosens, and moves. A bit of straw lies crosswise until the brush sends it along. The bolter watches the clean stream, and we watch his face, calm, narrowed slightly at the eyes, not stern, only attentive. This kind of work invites no grand gesture. The corrections are small, a gait eased by a fraction. A tap on the hopper, a brush stroke across a stubborn patch, a pause to empty the screenings before they mound too high. Yet the accumulation of small corrections is the job itself. Without them, the machine is only moving parts. In the 1930s, many people still understood such work because their own days were shaped by hand tasks. Even so, the seed mill bolter remained half hidden. He was neither the farmer in the field nor the merchant at the counter. He stood between them, making the seed more trustworthy, and then letting it leave without his name attached. As the afternoon light begins to lower, the bolter turns toward maintenance again, because upkeep threads through the day rather than waiting until the end. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter keeps a close relationship with friction. He knows where it belongs and where it should not be. Seed rubbing across a screen is useful friction. A belt slipping, a bearing drying, a frame rubbing at one corner, these are troubles beginning in a small voice. You can hear him notice them before anyone else would, because the machine's normal sound is already stored inside him. He may touch the side of a bearing housing with the back of his fingers, cautiously feeling for heat. He may watch a belt track along its pulley, looking for a drift that will fray the edge. He may pause the machine and clear a hidden accumulation of dust. Each act is brief. Together they keep the day from becoming harder than it needs to be. The oil can appears again, but only after judgment. Too much oil can carry dust into places where dust becomes grit. Too little oil lets metal wear itself tired. The bolter adds a drop, waits, and wipes away what is not needed. The rag darkens. The smell rises, thick and familiar. We feel the small satisfaction of a part quieting after it has been given what it needed. There is also the matter of belts. In an older mill, belts may run from shafts overhead, carrying power by motion shared across the room. They have their own smell, a dry leather or rubber warmth mixed with dust. When they move, they seem almost alive, but the bolter treats them with steady respect. He keeps clear of their pull, watches their line, and listens for slap or squeal. The floor beneath such equipment remembers spills and repairs. There may be a darker patch where oil once spread, a clean square where something was moved, or a splintered place near the hopper where many sacks struck down. You notice these marks with him? A workplace is a book written in wear, and the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter reads it without needing words. This is another reason the role fades from memory. The knowledge is local. It belongs to a particular machine, a particular floor, a particular sound on a particular afternoon. When the mill closes, or modern equipment replaces the old bolter, that knowledge does not transfer cleanly into a document. It leaves with the person who knew what a faint new rattle meant. Still, while we stand here, the knowledge remains present. It is in the way he leans near the frame without crowding it. It is in the way he brushes the mesh, not harder than needed. It is in the way he waits for the machine to tell him whether his adjustment has helped. And as the maintenance quiets the room again, we turn toward the people who moved around this work without always seeing it. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the 1930s was part of a small world of clerks, drivers, farmers, dealers, mill hands, and customers who passed through one another's days. You might hear the front door bell below, faint under the machinery. Someone enters to ask about an order, buy garden seed, or discuss a delivery. Their voice rises through the floorboards in fragments. While upstairs, the bolter keeps the screen moving. A customer may picture seed in tidy packets, labeled bins or sacks ready for planting. The process behind that neatness is easy to miss. Clean seed looks simple because someone has removed the evidence of difficulty. The chaff is gone. The stones are gone. The broken bits are reduced. The weeds are fewer. The labor disappears into the very cleanness it creates. The clerk downstairs may know the bolter's value quite well, even if he speaks of it plainly. A clean run means fewer complaints. A careful separation means less loss. A man who keeps lots straight protects the shop's reputation. These things matter in a city where business travels by word of mouth as much as paper. Still, the clerk's name may be easier to find later than the bolter's. We can imagine a farmer returning for his clean seed, lifting the finished sack with a practical nod. He may test the weight, glance at the tag, and perhaps open the top just enough to look inside. The seed has a cleaner smell now, less mixed with straw and storage. It runs through the hand more freely. He may say it looks good, and the words may travel upstairs like a small warm payment. The bolter might hear the compliment, or he might not. He might simply see the sack leave and turn to the next lot. There is a particular humility in work that is praised elsewhere, after your part is already done. You learn to take satisfaction from the condition of the thing itself. The clean stream, the proper weight, the clear tag, the row of sacks standing ready. Not every day goes smoothly. A screen blinds over. A sack tears. A lot proves worse than expected. Dust clogs a corner. Or a belt needs attention at an inconvenient hour. Yet even these troubles are usually quiet troubles, answered by brooms, brushes, hands, and time. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's patience is not soft, because life is easy. It is soft because the work has taught him not to spend his energy shouting at matter. By late afternoon, the voices below grow less frequent, and the upper room becomes its own small country again. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's upper room has boundaries you come to know by sound. Near the windows, street noise enters faintly. Near the stair, voices rise and fall. Near the machine, everything is vibration and seed. Against the far wall, among stacked frames and empty sacks, there is a pocket of relative quiet where dust drifts downward almost undisturbed. You can stand there and feel the shape of the room around us. The windows are not perfectly clean. Seed dust, city soot, and weather leave a film that softens the view. Through the glass, Peoria appears muted. Brick edges, roof lines, poles, wires, and perhaps a pale piece of river-like beyond the warehouses. The bolter may glance out now and then, but the room calls him back. The machine has the stronger claim during working hours. Light moves across the floor slowly enough that you might not notice until a sack that was bright becomes dim. The dust in the beam changes from silver to gold to brown. A fly may circle near the warm glass. A distant whistle marks time for someone else's shift. Inside, the bolter measures time by hoppers emptied, screens brushed, sacks tied, and boxes carried away. A small calendar may hang near the bench, or a clock with a face dimmed by dust. The exact date matters less than the season. In winter, the room holds cold longer, and the metal bites the fingers. In summer, heat gathers under the roof, and the dust sticks to sweat along the neck. Spring brings urgency because planting approaches. Autumn brings the smell of new lots and field residue. The 1930s pressed on people in ways that did not always enter conversation. Work was wanted, money watched, and waste disliked. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's day was shaped by that pressure, but the machine did not change its rhythm for worry. It asked for feed, air, screen, brush, and attention. Sometimes routine is not escape. It is a way to stand steadily while larger things remain uncertain. You can imagine him taking comfort in the known parts of the day. The hopper will need filling, the screen will need clearing, the sack will need tying, the broom will need passing under the spout. These are not grand consolations, yet they are real. When your hands know what comes next, the mind can rest inside the sequence. And as the season changes around the mill, we follow the bolter into the colder mornings of the year. A winter morning in a 1930s Peoria seed mill comes in with a harder edge. The bolter climbs the stairs wearing heavier clothes, and the air in the upper room feels still and metallic. You can feel the cold through the soles of your boots before the machine has started. The windows show frost at the corners, or a pale fog where warm breath meets the glass. Burlap feels stiff. Metal handles wake the fingers at once. The seed itself may be cold from storage. When it pours, it seems to carry the temperature of an unheated shed. Dust rises more slowly in the chill than hangs when the motor warms the room. The first minutes are quiet but not gentle on the body. The bolter flexes his hands, checks the screen, and waits for motion to bring heat back into the work. Coal smoke is stronger in winter. It seeps into the city air and settles around brick buildings. Inside the mill, it mixes with seed dust and oil until the room has a layered smell, dark at the base and dry above. You might hear a stove below or feel a little warmth near a pipe, but the bolter's upper room warms mostly by labor and machinery. His lunch in winter may be kept close to avoid freezing too hard or placed where it will not collect dust. Coffee matters more. A warm cup held between both hands is a small mercy. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may stand near the window at noon, watching breath fade from the glass, while outside the street carries slush, wagon tracks, and the dull shine of wet stone. Winter seed cleaning has its own pace. Farmers and dealers prepare for seasons that feel distant but are already approaching in ledgers and orders. A sack cleaned in January may matter in April. The bolter's work belongs to that hidden preparation. While fields lie hard and quiet, seed is being sorted indoors, made ready for soil that has not yet softened. There is a peacefulness in that thought, if we let it arrive slowly. The room is cold, the hands are rough, the floor is dusty, and yet the work is turned toward growth. The bolter stands inside winter, handling the possibility of spring one sack at a time. He may not speak of it that way, but the seed carries the meaning without needing him to name it. By the time winter light begins to fade, the room has finally warmed, and the day's last tasks feel almost reluctant to leave that earned heat behind. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in cold weather lingers over shutdown because warm machinery cools quickly and condensation can be unkind. He clears dust from places where damp might settle. He covers what should be covered. He keeps the screen frames dry and lifted from trouble. You feel the carefulness in each motion, not fussy, but born from knowing how small neglect becomes large inconvenience. A sack that comes in damp during winter gets special attention. The bolter smells it before trusting it. Damp seed can clump, heat in storage, or refuse to clean properly. He may set it aside, report it, or run it slowly if that is the chosen course. His authority may be modest, but his opinion carries the weight of direct contact. He is the one who must stand beside the machine and see what happens. The cold makes sounds clearer. A latch clicks sharply. A shovel rings harder against metal. Footsteps on the stairs seem more distinct. The motor's hum has less softness in it until the room warms. You notice how winter strips a workplace down to its edges, making every object feel closer to its material. Iron as iron, wood as wood, burlap as rough cloth. At the wash basin, winter water is almost punishing. The bolter rinses anyway. Dust mixed with cold water darkens his skin, then runs away. He may dry his hands on a towel already stiff from repeated use. The skin cracks more easily in this season, especially around the knuckles. String and burlap find those cracks, Work leaves its mark, and the mark is endured quietly. Still, there may be a small pleasure in stepping outside after a winter shift. The air, though cold, is cleaner than the upper room. The first breath beyond the mill tastes of smoke, river damp, and open sky. Peoria's lamps begin to show along the street. The bolter turns his collar up, and we walk with him for a while, feeling the day's vibration fade from the body by degrees. No one passing him would see the exact work he had done. They might see only a dusty man leaving a dusty building. But inside that plain figure are judgments made all day long, small protections given to seed, and a memory of sound so precise that one wrong note in the machine would have found him. And when winter loosens at last, the work quickens with the approach of planting season. Spring in the Peoria Seed Mill changes the feeling of every hour, because the seed moving through the bolter now has a nearer destination. The fields outside the city are softening. Roads may be muddy. Farmers begin watching the sky with a different kind of attention. Inside the mill, orders gather, sacks move more quickly, and the bolter's day fills with the pressure of readiness. You can smell spring even indoors. Damp earth comes in on boots. The river air feels less hard. Rain darkens coats and leaves a clean mineral scent near the receiving door. The upper room still smells of dust and oil, but the world pushing against the windows has changed. Light arrives earlier. It touches the screen before the first full run is through. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in spring works with fewer empty pauses. The hopper is fed, the screen watched, the sacks changed, the tags checked, and the next lot prepared before the last has fully left his hearing. Yet the tone remains measured. Hurry is managed, not obeyed. He knows that planting season does not forgive mixed sacks or careless cleaning. Customers may come and go downstairs with more purpose in their voices. A man wants to know if his lot is ready. Another asks about seed for pasture. A dealer checks a shipment. Their concerns rise through the floor like murmurs underwater. Upstairs, the bolter keeps his hands on the part of the season he can control. He gives the seed the cleanest path he can. Spring dust is not the same as winter dust. It sticks more when the air is damp. Screens may need brushing more often. Seed that flowed freely in dry cold may now hesitate. The bolter adjusts by feel, allowing the day's air to become part of the work. You learn, standing with him, that a mill is never separate from weather. Weather enters through sacks, coats, windows, and breath. There may be longer hours as planting draws close. The body knows this before the clock admits it. Shoulders lift sacks more slowly near evening. Feet ache in a dull, familiar way. The ears grow tired of the machine's constant hum, yet they cannot stop listening. A bolter who stops listening is no longer truly tending the bolter. Even so, spring brings a quiet reward. Clean sacks leave the mill and move toward fields. They are loaded onto trucks, wagons, or storage racks, each one carrying seed that has passed through the shaking screen upstairs. The bolter may never see the pasture or crop that follows. He sees only the sack leaving, and that has to be enough. As spring deepens, the Peoria Seed Mill becomes a place where preparation turns almost visibly toward use. The bolter's work in this season includes a special attentiveness to labels, because urgency makes mistakes easier. You stand beside him as he checks the tag twice before opening a sack. The pencil mark may be smudged by damp fingers. The string may have darkened from rain. A corner of the paper tag may curl. He smooths it with his thumb, reads, and sets the sack where it belongs. The clean seed sacks gather near the outgoing side in rows that seem to promise order against the mud outside. They are not beautiful in a polished way, but they have a practical beauty. Burlap rounded with seed, tags hanging square, knots pulled tight, dusty tops folded evenly. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's work is visible there for a moment, before the sacks leave and the evidence disperses into many farms. He may mark a problem lot with a note, or tell the clerk that it ran dirty, damp, or light. His language is simple because the facts are material. Too much chaff, too much broken seed, needs another pass. Screen changed, ran slow. These phrases carry the whole experience of the run, compressed into words that can travel downstairs. Sometimes, a lot must be run again. The bolter does not treat this as failure if the seed requires it. A second pass may improve the cleaning, though it must be done carefully to avoid unnecessary loss. You hear the same seed re-enter the hopper, perhaps cleaner already, perhaps still carrying stubborn fragments. The machine shakes, the air draws, and the bolter watches what remains to be separated. Repeated work can be restful when it is trusted, but it can also test patience. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's patience is practical, not sentimental. He does not need the seed to be easy. He needs to understand what it is doing. Once he understands that, he can choose the screen, slow the feed, brush more often, and accept the time required. In the afternoon, when rain taps the windows, the upper room feels enclosed and close. The sound of drops blends with the machine until the whole building seems wrapped in a soft grey cloth. You smell wet coats below, damp wood near the stair, and the constant dry center of seed dust around the bolter. The contrast is soothing in its way, rain outside, dry sorting within. A person drifting towards sleep might rest inside that contrast. Outside, roads shine and fields wait. Inside, the screen trembles, seed falls, and a worker keeps one small part of the season in order. We stand beside him without needing to speak, letting the repetition draw the mind down into a slower current. And when spring's hurry begins to pass, the mill settles into the broader rhythm of ordinary months. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter in the quieter season may have more time for maintenance, odd lots, and the small corrections that busy days postpone. The room feels larger when fewer sacks wait along the wall. Sound travels differently. A single run seems more distinct, and the silence between runs has room to spread. You can hear dust settle, or nearly hear it, which is sometimes enough. This is when screens are examined more thoroughly. Frames are lifted into good light. Mesh is checked for wear. Corners are tightened. A brush is repaired or replaced. The bolter may sort through old tags, clear a shelf, or move sacks that have stood too long in one place. None of it is separate from the main work. It is the hidden structure that lets the main work happen without confusion. A quiet month also reveals the building's age. Boards creak where they always creak. A window sticks in its frame. The stair rail has a looseness that everyone knows, but no one mentions until it worsens. Dust on high beams lies beyond ordinary sweeping, like a second history of the mill. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter works below it, making today's order beneath yesterday's accumulation. There may be time to sharpen the knife used for twine, or to mend a torn sack well enough for reuse. In the 1930s, reuse is not a quaint virtue. It is common sense. Burlap is shaken, folded, stacked, and brought back into service if it can still serve. String is saved if long enough. A sound crate is kept. A useful nail returns to the bench. We feel the economy of such habits. Not stinginess exactly, but a reluctance to waste the material world. The bolter's hands move through objects with this knowledge. A sack is not just a sack. A tag is not just paper. A screen frame is not just a frame. Each thing has a cost, a use, a place, and perhaps another use after the first one ends. In a quieter season, conversation may travel farther. A clerk's cough downstairs, a driver's greeting, a question about the weather, all rise into the upper room. The bolter may answer if he is near the stair, or simply smile to himself if the words are not for him. The mill is social in fragments, solitary in stretches, and always tied together by work. As the day moves through these quieter tasks, we begin to see how the bolter's role sits between craft and routine. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's work is routine because the motions repeat, but it is craft because the repetition never removes judgment. Every sack is familiar and different. Every screen is standard and temperamental. Every clean run follows rules, yet asks for attention to the present material. You stand beside him and feel that balance, the comfort of known motions, and the alertness of small variation. This is true of many quiet jobs, though few are named later. The hand learns faster than the record. The ear recognizes trouble before the manual describes it. The eye sees difference that a casual visitor would miss. The bolter may not call it knowledge, but he carries it from morning to evening, and it guides him through tasks that would confuse a newcomer. A new worker, if one came upstairs to learn, would first see only dust and shaking screens. He might think the machine does the work. Then the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter would show him where to stand, how to feed, when to brush, what to hear, and how to read the seed in the palm. The lesson would be plain, but not quick. It would take days before the rhythm entered the body. You can imagine the older man saying little. He might point with the scoop, tap the frame, or hold out a handful of seed for comparison. Good. Too much chaff. Too damp. Slow it. Change the screen. Such phrases are enough when the material itself is present. We learn with the imagined apprentice, not by lectures, but by watching what the bolter notices. The room teaches as well. Stand too close, and dust fills the face. Stand too far, and you miss the sound. Feed too fast, and the screen clogs. Leave a spill, and seed travels underfoot. Forget a tag, and the day becomes uncertain. A workplace has consequences built into its surfaces, and the bolter's calm comes partly from respecting those consequences. There is comfort in being taught by a task that repeats. You fail a little, correct a little, and return. The machine does not flatter, but it tells the truth. The seed either runs clean or it does not. The screen either clears or blinds. The sack either holds or spills. Such plain feedback can make the world feel more settled. And as the imagined lesson fades, we return to the old question of why this worker became so easy to forget. Few recall the 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter because his work happened behind the finished form of things. Cleaned seed left the mill looking as if it had always been clean. A field planted afterward gave no visible sign of the screen that had served it. A sack emptied into a drill or broadcaster lost its tag, its dust, and its connection to the upper room. Memory often follows spectacle, ownership, disaster, invention, or fame. The bolter belonged to none of these. He belonged to maintenance, preparation, and ordinary usefulness. His work prevented trouble rather than creating a story people would repeat. When trouble is prevented, the day simply continues, and the person who prevented it disappears into that continuation. There is also the matter of language. A job title can fade when the machine changes, or when the same work is folded into another role. Bolter, cleaner, mill hand, operator, laborer, seedman. One name becomes another. Later, someone reading an old record may not know which word held which task. The person becomes a blur in the archive, though his day was full of exact motions. The Peoria setting matters too. In a city known for many industries, river trade, machinery, distilling, earth-moving equipment, and warehouse work, a small seed mill worker could easily vanish from the larger story. Yet Peoria's working life was not only its largest names. It was also these quieter rooms, the upper floors where men tended screens, tied sacks, brushed dust, and kept agricultural life moving through town. We stand here because the forgotten parts are often where ordinary history breathes most evenly. Not the announcement, not the headline, but the repeated act. The hand on the gate, the brush across the screen, the sack lifted and tied, the tag checked again. A life may be made of such acts and still be worthy of our attention. To remember him gently is not to pretend his work was easy or romantic. The room was dusty, the hours were long, the pay may have been modest, the body grew tired, but there was skill here, and care, and a daily nearness to material things that many modern rooms have lost. And with that thought held softly, we let the day continue into another run of seed through the bolter. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter opens the next sack, and the room accepts the familiar dry fragrance. This lot is lighter, with more husk than the last. You can see it at once, the way the surface looks airy rather than dense. The bolter pours slowly, letting the machine take the material in a thin, obedient sheet. The screen begins its shaking work, and the air carries pale fragments toward the waste side. He watches the first minutes without turning away. Early in a run, the machine tells you whether your choice was right. If chaff travels cleanly away, and the seed drops full through the proper path, the body relaxes slightly. If the clean stream looks too thin or the waste too rich, adjustment comes. You feel the bolter's hand move toward the gate, pausing just long enough to be sure. The sound of this lot is softer. Less heavy tapping, more whispering. The screenings box fills with a fluffy layer that looks larger than it weighs. When he lifts it, it surprises you by its lightness, though the dust makes it unpleasant to carry too close. It smells like old hay, dry stems, and the inside of a barn loft after summer has been stored away. The clean seed is sampled and judged. He rolls it in his palm, then tips it into a tin. A few pale flecks remain, but not enough to worry him. The work is always in agreement between what is ideal and what is practical. A bolter knows this. Absolute purity may be impossible, wasteful, or unnecessary. Good work is not perfection shouted from a sign. It is a fit result, honestly made. We can rest in the humility of that. So many useful things are made well enough through patient judgment, not through grand declarations. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows when to keep refining and when to stop. He knows when another pass will help and when it will only steal good seed. This knowledge is quiet, but it has the weight of experience. A fly circles the window again, bumping the glass without understanding it. Downstairs, a drawer closes. Outside, a truck shifts gears and moves away. The bolter remains with the run until the last of the sack has passed through, and the clean stream dwindles to a few soft taps. As that lot finishes, the room pauses for the brief changeover that marks so many working days. The changeover is not a break exactly, but it has the feeling of a breath. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter closes the gate, clears the remaining seed, empties the receiving tray, and checks that the last lot has gone fully into its own sack. You stand with him in the small interval between one material and the next. The machine may still hum, but the purpose of the moment has shifted. He marks the tag or confirms the mark already there. Pencil against paper makes a faint, rough sound. If the point is dull, he turns it and writes with a sharper edge. The tag absorbs dust almost immediately, becoming part of the mill's color. He ties it securely, because a loose tag is a future confusion waiting on the floor. Then the hopper is brushed, not always deeply, but enough to keep one lot from carrying into another. A few stubborn seeds hide along the corners. He coaxes them loose with the brush tip. They fall and are gathered. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter understands that separation is not only the machine's task, it is the shape of the whole day. One lot kept distinct from the next. There is a satisfying neatness in the reset. Empty box, clean path, correct screen, next sack ready. The body appreciates beginnings when they are made properly. You might feel the same calm as a desk cleared before writing, a bench wiped before repair, or a table set before supper. Work begins better when the space is willing. The next sack is dragged closer, its bottom making a rough sound on the boards. The bolter bends, grips, lifts, and sets it in place. Dust rises from the fabric. The mouth is opened. A darker smell comes up this time, earthy and a little stale. He pauses, takes a pinch, and studies it. We pause too, because the seed has asked for closer notice. This is how variation enters routine. Not with drama, but with a smell, a texture, a sound slightly wrong. The bolter does not make a speech over it. He simply slows down. He gives the troublesome lot the respect of time, and as the troublesome lot begins, the afternoon narrows around the work. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter feeds the darker lot carefully, giving the screen only what it can handle. The seed moves reluctantly, mixed with bits of stem and a little dust that seems heavier than usual. The first pass across the screen gathers clumps. He brushes them apart before they can blind the mesh. His face remains calm, but his attention has tightened in a quiet way. The clean spout is not as full as before. The screening spout has too much life in it, too much of what might be usable. He notices. You see his hand reduce the feed, then adjust the angle of flow. A small change, then waiting. In work like this, every correction needs time to show its effect. Move too quickly from adjustment to adjustment, and you no longer know which one helped. He samples again. In his palm, the seed looks uneven. Some pieces are sound, others are broken or darkened. There are weed seeds, small and stubborn, shaped differently enough for a practiced eye to find them. The bolter turns them with his fingertip. We lean close in imagination. seeing how a whole field's future can seem to gather in a pinch of material no larger than a spoonful. This is where the machine's limits become clear. A bolter is not a magician. Some lots cannot be made excellent. They can only be improved. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows the difference, and that knowledge may be more valuable than optimism. He can clean, separate, reduce, and prepare, but he cannot undo weather, poor storage, careless threshing, or time. Still, improvement matters. A cleaner lot is easier to plant, more reliable to sell, and less likely to carry trouble forward. The work may not turn poor seed into fine seed, but it can make the best of what came through the door. There is a generous steadiness in that. We do not always begin with perfect material, and yet we can still make something more usable. The troublesome lot takes longer. The room seems to slow with it. The brush moves more often. The boxes fill unevenly. The bolter's hands darken with dust. Outside, afternoon continues without caring, but inside the upper room, time is measured by small improvements crossing a shaking screen. When the lot is finally through, the bolter does not hurry into the next one because difficult work leaves traces that must be cleared. He stops the feed and lets the machine run long enough to empty itself. Then he brushes the screen more thoroughly, working at the places where dark dust has gathered. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows that a troublesome lot can haunt the next one if the path is not cleaned. You can see why he takes the extra time. A few minutes now saves confusion later. The screenings box is heavier than expected, full of broken matter and small dense pieces. It lands with a duller sound when set down. He examines it, perhaps to judge whether the run should be noted. His thumb and forefinger separate a little pile. Good seed has escaped with the waste, but perhaps not too much. The decision is not simple, and he gives it a moment. He may call downstairs or carry a sample to the clerk. Their conversation would be brief, practical, and shaped by what the customer needs. Run again, mark as cleaned, hold for instruction, bag separate. The bolter's opinion comes from standing in the dust with the material itself, and that gives his words a plain authority. We hear the respect in the quietness of the exchange. Back upstairs, the air still carries the sourer smell of that lot. He opens a window a little if weather allows, and the city comes in. Street damp, coal smoke, river air, and distant iron all mingle with the room's dry center. The fresh draft moves the dust in loose sheets. For a few moments you can feel the mill as both indoor and outdoor, city and field, machine and weather. This blending is part of Peoria's character in such work. The city gathers what the surrounding land produces, passes it through buildings, hands, ledgers, screens, and freight routes, then sends it outward again. The seed mill bolter stands at one narrow point in that movement. Narrow, yes, but not insignificant. A narrow point can still carry a great deal of trust. He drinks water, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and looks at the next sack. The day continues. Work rarely waits for a perfect pause. It offers only small ones, and you learn to take them gently. And now the next lot is cleaner, lighter, and easier, as if the room has decided to let us rest while still working. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter lets the easier seed run in a fuller stream, and the machine responds with a steadier sound. After the difficult lot, this one feels almost smooth. The screen clears itself more willingly. The waste spout carries little more than husk and dust. The clean sack fills with a soft confidence, and the bolter's shoulders seem to settle lower. You can feel how contrast shapes a workday. A simple task after a hard one becomes pleasant, not because it is effortless, but because the body knows the difference. The same machine, the same room, the same dust, and yet the whole atmosphere has softened. The bolter may even take a longer glance out the window, letting his eyes rest on the pale street beyond the glass. This seed has a warmer smell, closer to hay dried well. It pours evenly from the sack, and the hopper accepts it without bridging. The sound is full and dry, like sand but more alive. You hear the clean stream landing in the sack below, a deepening hush as the sack gains weight. The bolter checks it, finds little fault, and lets the run continue. There are moments in repetitive work when the worker and the tool seem to agree. Nothing resists. Nothing asks to be forced. The hand feeds, the machine separates, the sack receives, and the room feels balanced. We stand inside that balance, allowing it to lengthen. It is not excitement, it is ease earned by attention. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may not have spoken of such moments, but he would have known them. Every job has its small mercies: a clean run, a good tool, a door that opens without sticking, a co-worker who remembers what you need before you ask, a lunch that stays dry, a screen that clears perfectly with one pass of the brush. The afternoon moves on in this kinder rhythm, and the light begins to lean toward evening again. As evening approaches, the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter starts to think ahead without leaving the present run. He knows which sacks remain, he knows which can wait. He knows what must be finished because it is promised below. You stand beside him as he checks the row with a glance, counting not in numbers so much as in effort, weight, and time. The machine still works, but the day has begun its quiet turn toward ending. Sounds from outside change. There are more footsteps, more closing doors, more engines heading home. Inside the mill, the air is thicker from hours of dust, and the windows hold the dull shine of late light. The bolter's shirt clings lightly at the back, then cools when he steps into a draft. He finishes the current sack and ties it with steady hands. The knot is not beautiful, but it is reliable. The tag hangs correctly. He lifts the sack with a little effort because the body is no longer fresh. It lands in the row with a low thump, settling among the others. For a moment, the completed work stands visible and countable. Then comes the decision about the next sack. Start it now or leave it for morning. The answer depends on size, promise, weather, and the condition of the room. A good worker knows that beginning too late can make a poor ending. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter considers this without ceremony. He may choose a small lot, something that can be finished cleanly before shutdown. This final run has a special quiet. Everyone knows the day is near its edge. The machine's sound seems lower, though perhaps that is only tired hearing. The seed falls, the screen shakes, and the bolter watches with the calm of someone bringing a long sequence to its proper close. We watch too, letting the repeated motion settle into the mind like rain. The last sack of the day need not be memorable to matter. It receives the same care as the first. That is part of the work's dignity. Not equal feeling, perhaps, because workers are human and fatigue is real, but equal habit. The habit carries the care when feeling is tired, and when the final run clears, the evening routine returns, familiar now as a path we have walked before. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter closes the gate and waits for the last seeds to pass. The stream thins, becomes irregular, and stops. He lets the machine shake a little longer, clearing what remains on the screen. The sound is lighter now, almost hollow. You can hear the room beyond it, the stair, the street, and the faint settling of sacks along the wall. He turns off the power, or signals for it, and the belts begin to slow. Motion leaves the room gradually. The hum lowers. The frame trembles less. A final seed falls somewhere out of sight with a tiny click that seems much larger in the coming silence. The bolter stands still for a moment, listening to the machine after it has stopped, because silence can reveal what motion covered. Then the broom, the brush, the rag, the boxes, and the tags return to their evening roles. He cleans the screen, clears the hopper, empties the waste, and straightens the sacks. We know these motions now, and that familiarity is soothing. Repetition in a script may seem like returning to the same place, but repetition in work is how a place remains usable. The dust is heavier tonight. It lies on the machine in soft ridges, gathers in the cracks of the floor, and pales the toes of his boots. He sweeps slowly, not because he is lazy, but because tired sweeping still needs to be effective. The broom strokes overlap, the pile grows, the room's disorder is drawn inward, becoming something that can be lifted and removed. A small spill near the wall catches his eye. He bends, gathering the seeds by hand, because the broom would scatter them farther. His knees may complain, his back may feel the day. Still, he gathers them. You can sense the habit of not leaving what can be made right. It is a modest habit, and perhaps a beautiful one. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's evening work becomes a quiet conversation with tomorrow. Here is a clean screen, here is an empty box. Here is a tag tied firmly enough to last. Here is a floor where the first step will be safe. Tomorrow will bring its own dust, but not because today was careless. As the upper room darkens, we stay with the last visible details before the lamp is lowered. The windows show less of Peoria now and more of the room reflected back. The bolter may see his own shape in the glass, blurred by dust and dusk. Cap, shoulders, rolled sleeves, the pale movement of a hand near the bench. Outside, lamps and windows begin to appear one by one, not suddenly, but as the evening decides to reveal them. The river air presses softly against the building. He checks the sacks one last time. The row is orderly, each tag facing outward or placed where it can be read. Empty burlap is folded or stacked. The screen frames are safe. The oil can is returned to its place. The brush rests where it can be found. Such details do not make history in the usual sense, but they make tomorrow possible, which may be history's quieter foundation. The room's smell changes after the machine stops. Without moving air, oil becomes more noticeable. Dust settles. Burlap gives off its warm, fibrous scent. Wood cools. A faint trace of the troublesome afternoon lot may still linger near the screenings box, but it is fading. You breathe more slowly because the room itself seems to be breathing more slowly. The bolter puts on his coat, and the fabric takes dust from the air as if it had been waiting for it. He may slap his cap against his leg once before setting it on. A pale mark blooms on the cloth. His lunch paper, if any remains, is folded and tucked away or thrown where such things go. He looks around. Not long. Just enough. This last look matters. It is the worker's private assurance. No sack left open. No tool lying where it might be stepped on. No screen exposed to damage. No gate left wrong. We look with him and feel the calm of a place that has been brought back to rest through attention. Then he takes the stairs down again, carrying the day in his clothes, his hands, and the low tiredness behind the eyes. The stairwell is dimmer than the upper room, and the smell of the lower floor rises to meet him. Paper, ink, damp coats, old wood, and street air. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter descends with one hand near the rail, each step sounding hollow and familiar. We follow at the same slow pace, because the end of work has its own rhythm and should not be hurried. Downstairs, the final practicalities wait. A word with the clerk, a note about the troublesome lot, a reminder that one screen should be checked in the morning, perhaps a question about whether a farmer is coming early. These words are plain, and their plainness is soothing. They belong to people who understand that tomorrow's work begins with what is remembered tonight. The clerk may close the ledger, dust the cover with his sleeve, and set it aside. The ledger holds weights, names, and figures, but not the whole truth of the day. It does not hold the sound of a screen clearing, the feel of cold metal, the smell of damp seed, or the bolter's brief pause before deciding to run a lot slowly. We hold those for a while instead. At the door, the outside air reaches him with relief. Even if it is cold, it is open. The lungs notice the difference. The street has its evening dampness, its smoke, its faint river smell, and the tired movement of people going home. Peoria's industrial edges soften in the dark, and the seed mill behind us becomes one lit window among many. The bolter steps out, and dust leaves the building with him in small, invisible amounts. It clings to the coat seam, the trouser cuff, the hair near the ear. At home, someone might smell the mill before he says a word. Seed dust, oil, burlap, and cold air make a humble signature, the kind a working day writes on a person without ink. We walk with him only as far as the evening allows, because the job remains behind in the room where the machine waits. The next time we climb to the upper floor, the season has shifted again, and the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter is working in warmer air. Summer changes the mill in slow, physical ways. Heat gathers beneath the roof. Dust sticks to sweat. The wooden frames feel warmer to the touch. The window, if opened, brings in air that is not cool, only moving. The machine's smell deepens in summer. Oil feels stronger. Burlap seems drier. Seed dust has a toasted edge when the sun has warmed the room for hours. You might hear insects outside, or the distant rattle of traffic softened by heat. The bolter wears lighter clothes if he can, but the dust still finds his collar, his wrists, and the creases beside his eyes. Summer may not be the busiest seed cleaning season for every lot, but the mill still has work. There are orders, maintenance, odd deliveries, and preparations that do not stop because the air is heavy. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter moves with economy. No wasted steps, no unnecessary lifting. Heat teaches the body to spend itself carefully. Water becomes more important. A cup sits where it will collect the least dust, though none can be avoided entirely. He drinks, wipes the rim with his thumb, and sets it back. The water tastes of metal, room air, and relief. You can feel the swallow travel down through a body warmed by machinery and weather. The screen can behave differently in heat. Dry material may flow freely, perhaps too freely if the feed is careless. Dust rises quickly. Static and dryness may make light husks cling. The bolter adjusts because adjustment is the nature of the job. He has worked in winter stiffness, spring dampness, and summer heat, and each season has taught him another version of the same machine. There is a slow comfort in knowing a place through all its temperatures. The cold handle, the warm rail, the damp sack, the dry screen, the dusty window in every kind of light. A person who works somewhere long enough does not just remember it. He carries a map of its changes inside his hands. And as summer heat settles over the roof, the bolter's day narrows into careful, economical motion. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter does not fight the heat with hurry. He lets tasks take their proper shape. A sack is lifted once, not twice. A tool is set where it will be needed. A spill is swept before it spreads. The screen is brushed before it clogs. Each choice saves a little effort, and those little savings matter in a room where the air itself feels heavy. Sweat changes dust. It makes pale streaks on the skin and darker marks on cloth. The bolter may wipe his forehead with a sleeve and leave a smudge. His hands, damp at the palm, pick up particles that would have fallen away in winter. You notice how work enters the body differently by season, how the same task becomes cold ache, spring dampness, or summer grit. The seed in summer can smell sharper if it is warmed in storage. Some lots carry a dry sweetness, others a faint mustiness that asks for caution. The bolter opens each sack and gives it that first brief judgment. We stand close enough to smell what he smells. Burlap, dust, warm plant matter, and the faint mineral smell of the room's old boards. Outside, Peoria may shimmer in the heat. Street sounds arrive slower, or seem to. A truck passes with a low, uneven engine note. Someone calls across a loading area. The river air may bring dampness without coolness. Inside, the machine keeps its steady work, indifferent to weather except where weather changes the seed. The bolter's calm in summer is not dreamy, it is measured. He knows fatigue can make a person careless, and heat can make a small task feel larger than it is. So he returns to habit. Check the tag. Feed the hopper, watch the stream, brush the screen, tie the sack, drink water, sweep the spill. The sequence holds him in order. A long afternoon in such heat can feel endless, but not in a frightening way. More like a road across flat country where progress is quiet and visible only when you turn back. The row of finished sacks grows, the pile of empty burlap rises, the screenings are cleared. Bit by bit, the day moves. When the heat begins to ease, even slightly, the room seems to loosen with the worker. Late summer light enters the Peoria Seed Mill at a lower angle, warmer and more forgiving. The bolter may open the window wider if the dust allows, and the air that enters carries evening rather than noon. You hear the outside world more clearly now. A car door, a far whistle, footsteps, and the layered hum of the city settling towards supper. The machine continues, but the room no longer feels sealed. This is a good hour for small finishing tasks. He may run a final easy lot, mend a sack, sort tags, or clear around the bench. The long heat has made everyone quieter. Words below are fewer. Movements are slower. Yet the work still has dignity because it continues at its proper pace, neither frantic nor abandoned. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter checks a row of cleaned sacks and presses one top flatter with his palm. The seed inside shifts under the burlap with a muted sound. He tightens a knot that has loosened slightly. He brushes dust from a tag so the writing can be read. These gestures are small, but they are not decorative. They protect the order created through the day. A person might ask why such details matter when the sacks will soon be moved, opened, and emptied. The answer lives in the work itself. Order is not made only for permanent things. It is made for the next person who touches the sack, reads the tag, lifts the load, or trusts the contents. Temporary order can still be a form of kindness. The bolter may never put it that way. He might simply say the tag should be readable, or the knot should hold. Practical language is often where kindness hides in working places. It does not announce itself. It appears as a tool returned, a spill swept, a path cleared, a note left before closing. As the summer evening cools the window glass, the upper room prepares again for rest, though tomorrow's heat already waits in the boards. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's work through many seasons teaches him to think in cycles rather than endings. A day ends, but the room waits. A lot is cleaned, but another arrives. A screen wears, is repaired, and returns. A sack leaves, and an empty one takes its place. We feel those cycles around him, not as monotony, but as a slow turning that gives the work its shape. In autumn, the mill changes once more. New harvest material begins to appear. The sacks carry fresher field smells, sharper bits of stem, and sometimes more dirt. Outside, the air cools and dries. Leaves may gather along the street, darkened by rain or dusted by passing wagons and trucks. Inside, the bolter senses the season in the first open sack. Autumn lots can be lively with residue. The field has come indoors in fragments. Stems, hulls, dirt, weed seed, and clean seed all arrive together, asking the bolter to divide them with patience. You can see why this job matters after harvest. Threshing has separated much, but not all. The seed mill refines what the field and barn have begun. The screen takes on a busy sound in autumn. More material crosses it. More brushing may be needed. The waste box fills with a rougher mixture. The bolter watches for dampness, because newly harvested seed can carry moisture that storage will not forgive. He smells, feels, tests, and slows the run when needed. His judgment stands between haste and spoilage. Peoria's autumn light is clear on some days and smoky on others. The river may appear briefly beyond the industrial edges, a pale strip through the window. The upper room seems less heavy than summer, less hard than winter, and full of motion. The bolter works in that middle air, with sleeves rolled, cap dusty, and hands moving in the rhythm they know best. Autumn also brings the satisfaction of seeing the year's material arrive. The seed is not an idea, it is here, in sacks, under the hand, passing over the screen. The bolter does not need to speak of harvest as a symbol. He handles it directly. We stand beside him and feel how the year enters a room through weight. And as autumn lots fill the day, the bolter's quiet expertise becomes most visible in what he chooses to slow down. A hurried autumn run can waste good seed or pass along trouble. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows this, so he treats each new lot with fresh attention. Even if the day is crowded, the first pour is measured. The screen's behavior is watched. The clean stream is sampled early. The waste is checked before assumptions settle in. Repetition does not excuse him from looking again. Some seed arrives clean enough to run easily. Some carries burrs, hulls, or small weed seed that tests the screen. Some comes from a grower who did careful work before sending it in, and some from one who did not have time, equipment, or weather on his side. The bolter receives all of it without judgment that matters beyond the practical. The material is what it is. The job begins there. The machine shakes, and the afternoon fills with the smell of new field dust. It is sharper than old storage dust, less stale, and sometimes mixed with the green-brown scent of stems not fully dried. Your nose learns these differences slowly. The bolter may have learned them without ever naming them, simply by standing in the same room through many seasons. He keeps a closer eye on the waste stream when the lot is valuable or difficult. A handful from the screenings may reveal too much good seed. Then he adjusts. A handful from the clean sack may reveal too much weed. Then he adjusts again. The work is a conversation between streams, and the bolter listens to both sides. This is a peaceful idea, if we let it stay practical. Good work often means listening to what is leaving as much as what is kept. The rejected pile, the missed detail, the edge case, the stray seed under the bench, all have something to say. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's calm comes from attending to the whole process, not only the reward. By evening, autumn dust has settled thickly on the sill, and the room holds the smell of harvest after the machine has stopped. The shutdown after an autumn day can take longer because more residue has traveled through the mill. The bolter brushes the screen carefully, clearing husks lodged in the mesh. He empties the waste box, then checks the corners for damp clumps. He sweeps under the machine where field dirt gathers in gritty little drifts. You hear the broom strike heavier particles, a scratch beneath the softer sweep of chaff. His clothes carry the day strongly now. The cuffs smell of dust and plant matter. The knees show where sacks have leaned. His palms are dry from burlap and washing. He may cough once, quietly, and then continue. We do not dwell on discomfort sharply, but we do not erase it. Warm realism means the job is allowed to be tiring and still worth describing gently. The row of clean sacks is especially satisfying after an autumn run. Raw, mixed, uneven lots have become something more ordered. Not perfect, not magical, but cleaner, more useful, more ready. The tags hang like small promises. The bolter checks them by habit. And habit once again carries care when the body is tired. Outside, leaves scrape along the street or cling wetly near the door. The air is cooler when he steps down to the lower floor. A clerk may mention tomorrow's deliveries. The bolter nods, storing the information where practical memories live. First thing, the damp lot, then the small order, then the screen change. Tomorrow begins in tonight's few words. The mill at closing holds a deep autumn quiet. The warmth of the day drains from the wood. Dust settles. A sack shifts once with a small sigh, as if the seed inside has found a more comfortable shape. You stand in the upper room a moment longer, and the stillness feels full rather than empty. Few recall the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter because his labor was folded into cycles larger than himself. Planting, harvest, cleaning, selling, sowing again. The worker stood inside that cycle, steady and nearly unseen. But tonight, as we follow the dust, the screens, the sacks, and the low light, we let his part remain visible. And with the seasons turning around the mill, we come closer to the inner patience that made the work possible. That patience did not arrive as a thought first, but as a bodily agreement with the room, the way the 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter learned to stand where the vibration was useful and not wearing. You can feel the floor through him, the tremor under the boards, the small give of old wood near the hopper, and the firmer place by the rail. A new worker might shift restlessly, but the bolter settles into the stance that lets the machine speak without shaking the whole body to fatigue. His patience begins with waiting long enough to know what is happening. A screen may look clogged before it truly is, or clear before a hidden corner begins to blind. A seed stream may seem too thin until the flow steadies. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter learns not to rush his judgment. He watches a few breaths longer, listening to the spout, feeling the rhythm in the frame, letting the material show its nature. In this kind of work, the hands are quick only after the mind has been slow. The brush moves when it is needed. The gait changes when the stream has proved its trouble. The sack is shifted when its weight begins to pull the wrong way. You notice how little fuss there is. The bolter's movements are not decorative, and the lack of decoration is part of their beauty. The room rewards such restraint. When he waits properly, he avoids 2 or 3 later corrections. When he brushes gently, the screen lasts longer. When he samples before deciding, he saves good seed from the waste box. Each quiet choice seems small, but the day is made almost entirely of quiet choices, layered like dust on a high beam. We stand beside him as another run crosses the screen, and the sound becomes a teacher. It says, steady, steady, thinner, full again. It says chaff lifting, grit tapping, good seed falling. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter hears these messages without turning them into language. You, half at rest, can let them become a soft pattern in the background of breath. And as we listen more closely, the machine itself becomes less like an object and more like a place within the place. The bolter is not one single piece in the way a stranger might imagine, but a gathered arrangement of frames, screens, gates, spouts, supports, belts, and moving parts, each asking for its own share of attention. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows the machine not by diagram, but by reach. His arm knows where the latch is, his palm knows the rail, his foot knows where not to stand when a sack is open. The hopper is the first receiving mouth, dark at the bottom unless light strikes into it. Seed falls there and begins its guided descent. If the hopper sides are dry and smooth, the flow is kind. If dust or damp has made a ledge, the seed may hesitate. The bolter taps with just enough force, listening for the hollow shift of material loosening itself and falling into place. The screen frame is the heart of the work, though it has no drama about it. It shakes, receives, divides, and endures. The mesh may be fine enough to demand a careful brush, or stout enough to take a rougher lot. You see seed travel across it in a layer that seems almost liquid, while bits that do not belong are carried away, lifted, caught, or dropped according to size, weight, and shape. Below, the spouts speak separately. One is fuller, one is thinner, one may carry screenings, another clean seed, another dust if the mill has such an arrangement. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter learns those voices the way a person learns footsteps in a house. The wrong sound need not be loud. It only needs to be different from yesterday. Belts and pulleys lend the machine its steady life. They smell of warm material, dust, and motion. They ask for respect because moving power is never casual, even in a quiet room. The bolter keeps his hands where hands belong, using tools rather than impulse. His calm is not carelessness. It is care practiced so often that it no longer needs to announce itself. A machine tended this way becomes part of the worker's daydreams, but not in a grand sense. He may hear its rhythm while walking home. He may notice silence at supper. He may wake knowing which screen must go in first. Work enters memory through repetition, and repetition gives it a room of its own inside the mind. By the next run, we begin to understand how the bolter's knowledge was held in motion rather than in writing. Written instructions might say to select a screen, regulate feed, collect clean seed, and remove screenings, but those words are thin beside the actual day. The 1930s Peoria Seed Mill Bolter needs to know how a damp clover lot smells before it clogs, how a sack should slump when it is half full, and how the clean stream sounds when too much good seed is leaving through waste. You cannot learn that all at once from a page. He learns by doing and by being corrected by matter. If he feeds too fast, the screen tells him. If he chooses poorly, the waste box tells him. If he forgets a corner, tomorrow morning tells him. Such lessons are plain and patient, but they leave a mark. You can feel their shape in the way his hands pause before acting, as if remembering many small errors that no longer need repeating. An older worker may have taught him, or perhaps he learned by necessity when a previous man left. The lesson would have taken place in noise, dust, and partial sentences. Stand here, not there. Watch this, feel that, too much. Slower, brush now. You can hear the teaching as short, practical speech wrapped inside the machine's longer sound. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may have begun awkwardly. Everyone does. He may have torn a tag, overfilled a sack, lifted with his back instead of his legs, or sent good seed too freely into the screenings. Over time, the awkwardness wore away. Not entirely, because every worker remains human, but enough that the routine became trustworthy. Trustworthy routine is not dull to the person depending on it. It is shelter. The farmer trusts the cleaned lot, the clerk trusts the tag, the owner trusts the day's output. The bolter trusts his own sequence of touch, look, listen, adjust. We can rest inside that chain of trust, hearing the seed fall into the sack as a small, steady proof of order. And while the work continues, the city around the mill carries its own rhythm through the walls. Peoria in the 1930s is not a silent backdrop, and the seed mill bolter hears more of it than he may consciously notice. Trains shift in the yards with deep iron knocks. Trucks pass over uneven streets. River traffic moves beyond the warehouses. A whistle from another shop divides the day for people he will never meet. All those sounds arrive softened, filtered through brick, wood, dust, and distance. The city smells enter in layers. Coal smoke in the morning, damp river air after rain, gasoline and hot metal near the street, wet wool when men come through the lower door. In the upper room, these scents mingle with burlap, seed, oil, and old timber. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter works inside that mixture, city and field breathing through the same building. From the window, he may see only parts of the city. A roofline, a stack, a wire, a sign painted on brick. The river might be hidden most days, known more by dampness than by sight, yet its presence matters. Peoria grew by movement, by goods arriving and leaving, and the seed mill belongs to that wider traffic, though the bolter's task remains as small as a seed in his palm. A delivery below interrupts the room with a change in vibration. Heavy sacks landing downstairs make the boards answer. Voices rise briefly. The bolter may pause, not from alarm, but from recognition. More work has entered the building. You can feel the future of the afternoon in those thuds, each sack becoming a promise that the screen will be fed again. The city's larger stories pass outside, but upstairs the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter stays with his narrow certainty. Seed goes in raw, comes out cleaner, and must be kept separate on the way. This is the line he tends. It may not be famous, yet it is stable. And stability has its own quiet grace. We let the outside sounds remain distant, because the machine in front of us is still the center of the night's listening. As the bolter returns to the hopper, he opens another sack and the field comes into the room again. You can hear the loosened twine rasp through the burlap fold. You can smell the first breath of the lot, dry, faintly sweet, with a trace of soil. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter leans close enough to judge it, then lifts the sack carefully, guiding the first pour like someone setting water into a narrow channel. The seed begins its passage, and the room resumes its balanced labor. We watch the surface tremble across the screen. We see small pieces divide by what they are, not by what anyone wishes them to be. He adjusts the feed by a fraction, and the clean stream grows steadier. The waste spout ticks with bits of chaff and grit, less full than before, which tells him the lot is better. His hand reaches for a sample and catches it midstream. A tin cup would do, but the palm is faster, warmer, and more direct. The seed gathers there in a small mound. He spreads it with a thumb. Dust clings to the lines of the skin. A few dark flecks are picked out and dropped aside. The rest returns to the sack, because good seed should not be wasted for the sake of looking. This is a touch-based world. Even the eye depends on the hand, because the seed must be lifted, rubbed, poured, and felt. The bolter's fingertips can notice dampness before the screen complains. His wrist can sense the difference between a full scoop and a light one. His shoulder knows when a sack is almost empty by the way it folds against him. Modern memory often favors machines that look impressive, but this older room reminds us that machines depended on human touch. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter did not stand apart from the machine admiring automation. He stood beside it, correcting, feeding, cleaning, and interpreting its work. The machine moved steadily, but he made that steadiness useful. And as the run continues smoothly, we drift toward the quieter human details that lived around the task. The bolter's clothes are part of the work, chosen or worn down according to what the room demands. A cap keeps dust from the hair, though never all of it. A shirt becomes pale at the shoulders. Trousers shine slightly at the knees from leaning into sacks. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may have a coat used only for the mill, because seed dust travels too faithfully to be welcome everywhere. His boots matter. The soles need grip on dusty boards, and the leather must tolerate grit, spilled seed, damp streets, and the pressure of long standing. A nail in the sole or a worn heel changes the day more than a person outside such work might guess. You feel every uneven place when lifting weight. You learn which boards give and which nailhead catches. Hands tell the rest of the story. Twine roughens the fingers. Burlap scratches the wrist. Cold water reddens the skin. Oil darkens the creases. Dust dries everything by degrees. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's hands are not merely strong, they are informed. They know what to hold gently and what to grip firmly, what to test, what to avoid, and when to let gravity help. He may carry a pocket knife sharpened more for utility than appearance. It cuts twine, trims a rag, opens a stubborn seam, or scrapes a bit of hardened dust from an edge. The handle fits his palm because repeated use has made it familiar. When he folds it closed, there is a small click, clean and satisfying, almost lost beneath the machine's hum. At noon, he unwraps his food with those same hands. Bread, perhaps a little sausage, cheese, an apple, or leftovers from home. The paper gathers dust if left open too long. He eats carefully, facing away from the worst of the room. Coffee or water clears the throat. We sit near him in that brief pause, where the day's roughness softens into ordinary hunger. These human details are not ornaments to the job. They are the job as lived. Tools, clothes, food, weather, aches, jokes, silence, and small habits all belong to the work as much as the machine does. Without them, history becomes too clean, like seed that has lost the memory of the field. And after the noon pause, the bolter returns to a set of tasks that seem familiar, yet never exactly repeat. The afternoon begins with a screen change, and the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter approaches it as calmly as someone turning a page. The old screen is lifted out and leaned where dust will not fall too heavily into it. The new screen is checked along the corners. He runs his fingers near the edge, not across the mesh carelessly, but close enough to feel damage if it is there. The frame rests in his hands with worn wooden warmth. The chosen screen reflects the seed ahead. Smaller openings for smaller separations. Larger ones for bigger material. Sometimes shape matters as much as size, and the slotted screen may help where a round opening will not. The bolter may not explain this in formal terms, yet his selection carries the experience of many sacks. We see knowledge sitting quietly in the act of choosing. He seats the frame and fastens it. A latch resists, then gives. A small puff of dust rises from the rail. He wipes it, tests the fit, and waits for the machine to begin again. The first moments after a screen change always carry a little uncertainty, because the room has changed its inner arrangement. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter listens as if greeting a familiar voice in a different hallway. The new lot runs well at first, seed spreads evenly, and chaff travels where it should. He watches without relaxing too much. The machine may behave for a minute before revealing a problem. You can feel his attention spread across several points. Hopper, screen, clean stream, waste stream, sack, tag, and the sound under all of it. This is the mental shape of the job, wide and low, never frantic. A person falling asleep can follow it without being pulled sharply awake. There is always another small thing to notice, and none of it demands alarm. The dust, the wood, the screen, the seed, the sound, the hand, all move within the same calm circle. And while this afternoon lot runs, the question of memory returns in a gentler form. Few recall the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter because his work did not produce a finished object that stayed in one piece. A chair remains a chair, a watch remains a watch, a building remains if weather and money allow it. But clean seed is meant to vanish into soil. Its success is disappearance. The better it serves, the more completely it leaves the hand that prepared it. The sack may survive for a time, reused in a barn or cut for another purpose, but even that carries the company name more often than the workers. The tag is thrown away, the ledger is boxed or lost, the dust is swept out, the mill changes owners, changes machines, or closes. The bolter's motions, once repeated thousands of times, leave only faint marks on boards no one thinks to save. Yet forgetting is not the same as unimportance. A thing can be forgotten because it was woven too closely into daily life to stand out. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter belonged to that woven world. His work helped farms prepare, helped dealers sell, helped seeds move from storage to planting. Its ordinariness was the reason it mattered and the reason it faded. We stay with the ordinary because it steadies the mind. A person does not need every remembered life to be exceptional. There is rest in knowing that useful, careful days existed in upper rooms, under dusty windows, beside patient machines. There is rest in knowing that someone tied the sack, checked the tag, and swept the floor before leaving. The bolter himself may not have wished to be remembered beyond those who knew him. He likely wanted steady pay, decent work, a tolerable day, and tools that did not fail him. Still, when we listen backward, we can give his routine a little room. Not a monument, only presence. And as the clean sack fills, presence is enough for the moment. The sack reaches its proper weight by feel before the scale confirms it. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter eases the stream and lets the last seed fall, judging the fullness by the way the burlap rounds under his hand. He ties it, lifts it, and sets it aside. Later the scale may give its formal answer, but his body has already made a practical guess. Most days, that guess is close. Weight is another language in the mill. A full sack pulls downward with certainty. A light sack shifts loosely. A damp sack feels wrong for its size. A sack of finer seed may seem dense, compact, and quiet, while a bulky light seed rustles against the cloth. You learn these differences by carrying them, not by imagining them. The scale downstairs translates that bodily sense into figures, but the figures are not spoken in our script as sharp marks. They are weights in ordinary speech, amounts that matter to a buyer, a seller, and a man stacking sacks in a row. The beam balances. The pointer steadies. Someone makes a note. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter has already turned toward the next task because the day continues. He clears the spout with 2 fingers and a brush handle, making sure no seed remains hidden. A few pieces fall late, striking the bottom of the empty sack with a tiny sound. He smiles perhaps, or perhaps not. It is enough that he noticed. Work like this contains many small rescues that never become stories. The next sack waiting by the wall has a torn corner, tied roughly before arrival. He examines it before moving. If lifted carelessly, it will leak. He sets it in a tub or positions the tear upward, then opens it from the safer end. You can feel the practical imagination at work, seeing the spill before it happens, and arranging the world to avoid it. Avoided trouble is almost invisible, but it is one of the bolter's chief products. No mixed lot, no split sack, no clogged screen allowed to ruin an hour, no unreadable tag, no dangerous spill on the floor. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's day is full of things that do not happen because he is there. As afternoon lengthens, we follow those invisible successes through the mill's quiet order. The floor remains passable because he sweeps before spills spread. The tags remain useful because he checks them before dust covers the writing. The screen remains productive because he brushes before the mesh blinds over. The machine remains steady because he hears trouble early. These are not separate acts, so much as one continuous attitude, a willingness to stay near enough to notice. You stand with him near the hopper as another run begins. The seed is ordinary, neither difficult nor especially clean. That ordinariness is restful. Not every sack needs to teach a lesson. Some simply pass through, requiring decent attention and yielding decent results. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter gives it that attention anyway, because ordinary material still deserves proper handling. The room's sound settles into a middle pitch. The clean spout pours. The waste spout ticks. The belt hums. The screen trembles. A truck rattles outside and fades. Your mind can follow one sound, then another, the way a hand might move from rail to sack to brush. The work creates a landscape of low, repeated signals. A little dust coats the water cup again. He wipes it with a thumb before drinking. The gesture is so small it nearly escapes notice, yet it says much about the room. Dust is constant, and the worker's answer is not outrage. It is wiping, covering, brushing, sweeping, washing, and continuing. The rhythm of the job includes the rhythm of managing what the job creates. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may have carried dust in his dreams, though we need not make that thought heavy. Repeated sensory whirls often follow people home. A baker smells flour after leaving the bakery. A printer carries ink in the skin. A bolter may still hear seed falling while lying in the dark. The day's soft rush continuing for a while behind the eyes. There is something soothing in that after sound, Not the discomfort of labor, but the echo of sequence. Pour, sift, separate, tie, sweep. Pour, sift, separate, tie, sweep. When softened by memory and night, even the work's rough edges become slower, rounder, easier to breathe beside. And as that after-sound lingers, we return to the mill's place between field and home. The Peoria Seed Mill receives the field in sacks, but the bolter's upper room changes the field into something a person can carry away with more confidence. Raw harvest is mixed, imperfect, and full of traces. Clean seed is still natural, still varied, but more ready. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter stands at that transformation, not making the seed, not planting it, but preparing it for its next life. This middle role is easy to overlook because it is neither beginning nor ending, yet many quiet jobs live in the middle. The lockkeeper between river levels, the typesetter between manuscript and page, the night watchman between closing and morning, the bolter between field and planting. Such workers tend passages, and passages are often remembered less clearly than arrivals. In the upper room, passage is visible as movement. Seed enters the hopper and leaves by another path. Chaff enters and leaves elsewhere. Dust rises, settles, and is swept. Sacks arrive slumped and depart tagged. The work is all transition, but the room itself feels steady because the transition repeats within known boundaries. You can feel the comfort of that steady passage. The bolter does not need to control the whole year. He controls the angle of a gate, the cleanliness of a screen, the accuracy of a tag, and the care of his hands. That is enough for the moment. Sometimes enough for the moment is all a tired mind needs to hear. The smell of the room deepens toward evening again. Warm dust, burlap, oil, and wood. A faint breeze brings smoke from outside. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter turns slightly, listening to something below, then returns to the stream. His attention leaves and comes back smoothly, like a door opened and closed without sound. We stay in that smoothness because sleep prefers work without sharp corners. The seed does not leap, the light does not flash, the machine does not surprise us. It moves in its established way, and the worker moves with it, both held by routine. By the next day, the same room will feel both familiar and new, as working rooms always do. Morning arrives with a different sky, and the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter notices it first through the windows before any weather report could matter. Grey light means dampness may follow. Bright, hard light means dust may rise quickly. A warm morning under cloud makes the room close. A clear, cold morning leaves metal sharp under the hand. Weather writes itself into the work before anyone names it. He enters, hangs his coat, checks the bench, and looks at the first sacks. The order of the day may have been set by need, promise, or simple practicality. He reads the tags slowly enough to avoid error. You stand beside him and see how paper, string, and pencil hold the day's plan together. Fragile things can carry serious responsibility. The first sack is opened, and the seed smells clean enough. He chooses the proper screen without much hesitation. The machine starts. The belt takes motion. The room changes from waiting to doing. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter stands in his known place, and the new day begins with the same old mercy, a task that can be entered one step at a time. There is no need to think of the whole day at once. Only the first pour, then the first sample, then the first adjustment, then the first tied sack. This is how large work becomes bearable, by dividing itself into motions small enough for hands. We feel that division as soothing, because the mind can follow without strain. Downstairs, the clerk may unlock the office and set out the ledger. A chair scrapes, a stove door opens, someone coughs. The lower floor wakes in its own sequence. Upstairs, the bolter's machine has already found its voice. The clean seed begins to fall, and the sound fills the sack like quiet rain. The morning is neither special nor dull. It is simply another entry into work, and that is where the deepest calm of this forgotten role may live. As the day gathers strength, the Peoria Seed Mill Bolter moves through a set of repetitions that are never merely repeated. He lifts, pours, watches, brushes, samples, ties, checks, and sweeps. Each verb could be plain on a page, but in the room, each one has texture. Lifting has weight. Pouring has angle. Watching has patience. Brushing has pressure. Sampling has judgment. Tying has trust. The mill's dust is now bright in the stronger light. It sits on the edge of the hopper and the rim of the window latch. It softens every hard line. You can draw a fingertip through it and leave a clean mark, though the bolter is too busy to do such a thing without purpose. For him, dust is not atmosphere alone. It is a condition to manage. He clears the screen as the run continues, brushing lightly across the place where husks gather. The brush makes its dry whisper. A few lodged pieces leap free. The clean stream improves. The correction is so small that a visitor might miss it. The bolter misses none of it, because the job has trained his attention to value modest changes. A man downstairs calls up about the next order. The bolter answers without leaving his station, voice raised just enough. The words blur under the machine, but the meaning passes. Yes, after this one. Different screen. Keep the tag with it. The conversation is practical and brief. Part of the mill's working fabric. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's day is built from such threads. Sound, touch, smell, note, weight, light, and timing. Any one thread seems slight. Together they hold the process. You can rest in the idea that a quiet job may be complex without being loud, and skilled without calling attention to skill. And while the machine separates seed from chaff, the bolter separates what needs attention from what can be allowed to continue. This kind of attention is mercifully ordinary. It does not search for novelty. It searches for the next necessary thing. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows that not every sound needs action, not every fleck needs concern, and not every imperfection demands another pass. He learns proportion. Without proportion, the work would become endless and anxious. A little chaff in a sample may be acceptable, depending on the seed and the order. A little good seed in the waste may be acceptable if the alternative is worse. A screen brushed too often slows the day unnecessarily, while one brushed too late spoils the run. The bolter lives among these balances, making them with a calm born of experience. You can feel how restful proportion can be. The world does not have to be perfect to be tended well. The sack can be sound enough. The tag can be clear enough. The screen can be clean enough for this lot, and cleaned more deeply after. The day can be imperfect and still honestly worked. The room itself seems to understand this. It is not spotless. It is not quiet. It is not comfortable in every season, yet it functions because people have learned where order matters most. The paths are clear. The lots are marked. The tools can be found. The machine is watched. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter keeps that practical order alive. He reaches for another sample, lifts it to the light, and lets it pour back slowly. The seed makes a small stream from palm to sack, catching brightness for a moment. Such an image might be all that remains of him if memory were kinder. A dusty hand, an upper room, clean seed falling like sand. But memory is rarely arranged so neatly, and the day moves on before any image can ask to be preserved. The next task brings a lot that needs air as much as screening. Light husks cling and ride with the seed unless lifted away. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter adjusts the air draw, if the mill's equipment allows it, with caution. Too strong, and good seed may be carried off with the waste. Too weak, and the chaff remains. Air, like screen and feed, must be judged by result. You hear the change as a subtle pull in the sound, a hollow breath within the machine's shaking. Dust rises more actively. Light husks flutter and vanish toward the waste side. The clean stream grows denser. The bolter watches, then samples, then waits. The air moving through the machine gives the room a different feeling, as if a dry indoor wind has joined us. His eyes may water from the dust, but he blinks and continues. He does not dramatize discomfort. Working people often do not, partly from habit, partly from necessity. We can acknowledge the sting without making it the center. The center remains the careful separation of seed, the measured adjustment, the row of sacks growing slowly by the wall. A cloth may be tied over the mouth in some dusty mills, or a worker may simply endure what the room gives. Practices varied, and the 1930s did not always offer the protections later generations would expect. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's calm should not make us forget the grit in his throat, the dryness of his eyes, or the relief of stepping outside. Even so, the sensory world is not only harsh. There is warmth in the smell of burlap, comfort in the steady hum, and satisfaction in the clean fall of seed. There is the small pleasure of a tool fitting the hand. There is the glow of late sun on dust, turning inconvenience briefly golden. The air-assisted run finishes well, and the bolter closes the gate with a little extra care, because light seed has a way of lingering where heavier grain would fall. He brushes the interior paths slowly, coaxing remnants from corners and seams. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows that light material hides. It clings to rough wood, catches behind a lip, and floats down after you thought the path was clear. He waits long enough to see what settles. Then he brushes again, not irritated, just thorough. The clean sack is lighter than its size suggests. When he lifts it, it shifts broadly, almost like a pillow filled with dry plant matter, though the comparison would not occur to him in such soft terms. He sets it down and tightens the top. The twine cuts across the burlap mouth, drawing it into folds. The tag is tied, and the lot becomes part of the ordered row. The screenings from this run are pale and airy. They make little sound when emptied. A cloud rises, and sunlight catches it. The bolter turns his face slightly away. You can smell dry husk, faintly sweet, and the sharper odor of dust lifted from a place it had settled. The waste settles again elsewhere, because dust's journey is never fully ended by one sweeping. He wipes the ledge around the machine, and the rag leaves a broad mark. Under the dust, the wood is darker. The contrast lasts only until the room resumes working, but for a moment, the machine shows its surface more clearly. A workplace often reveals itself in these temporary clean lines, made and slowly covered, made and covered again. This could feel futile if viewed from too far away, but from inside the work, it is simply maintenance, and maintenance is life continuing. You wipe because dust gathers, you sweep because seed spills, you mend because sacks tear. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter understands that repetition is not failure. It is the nature of keeping a useful place ready. And when the ledge is clean enough, the next sack comes forward with its own small demands. This next sack is older, perhaps stored longer than the others, and the smell rises stale when the top is opened. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter pauses. You pause with him. Old storage has a closed smell, a mixture of dust, dryness, and something slightly flat, as if the air inside the sack has not moved in months. He takes a handful and feels for dampness or damage. The seed is not ruined, only tired in its way. It flows, but not brightly. More broken bits appear. The bolter chooses a measured feed and watches the screen carefully. The machine can clean some of the oldness away in material terms, removing fragments and dirt, but it cannot make the seed newly harvested. The bolter accepts this, and acceptance helps him work wisely. He samples the clean stream and studies it. A few pieces are discarded from the palm. He rubs the rest gently and lets them fall back. The sound is softer than fresh seed, less lively. You begin to understand that the bolter's work includes recognizing limits without discouragement. Not every lot is equal. Not every day gives ideal material. Still, the task is to improve what can be improved. The room seems quieter during this run, though the machine has not changed. Perhaps our attention has lowered with the seed's tired quality. Outside, a cloud covers the sun, and the windows lose their bright edge. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter continues, steady as before, showing the same care to a lesser lot that he gave to the cleaner ones. There is a tender lesson hidden there, though we keep it plain. Care is not only for things already excellent. Care also belongs to worn sacks, stale lots, clogged corners, tired hands, and late afternoons. The bolter's routine makes room for all of them, not sentimentally, but faithfully. As the older lot finishes, the light returns, and the room brightens just enough to carry us onward. A few seeds remain in the bottom of the sack, caught in folds and seams. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter shakes the burlap, taps the corners, and opens the mouth wider. Seed falls in brief spurts, then stops. He turns the sack partly inside out and brushes the seam. Nothing useful should remain hidden if a little patience can bring it forward. Empty sacks have their own afterlife. They are shaken, folded, patched, stacked, sold, reused, or set aside. Burlap is too useful to discard without thought. You hear the heavy cloth flap once as he shakes dust from it near the open window. Dust drifts outward and inward at the same time, confused by the breeze. The sack then folds into a rough square under his hands. The stack of empty sacks smells strongly of fiber, storage, and every lot they have carried. Some are printed with company names, some marked by hand, some patched with darker cloth. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter knows which are sound and which will fail. He sets them accordingly, making decisions about future use while the present machine waits. Such thrift belongs to the era as well as the room. The 1930s taught many people to respect material through necessity. A sack could be a container, a patch, a cover, or fabric for another rough use. String could be saved. Paper could be turned over. Wood could be mended. The bolter's world is full of objects that continue serving after their first purpose. We can let that continuation settle gently in the mind. Nothing here is instant. Nothing exists for one bright moment and then vanishes without thought. Things wear, are repaired, are reused, and eventually become dust themselves. The seed mill is a place where usefulness moves slowly from form to form, guided by hands. And when the empty sacks are stacked, the room opens again for another stretch of machine work. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter returns to the waiting row, where the next lot has a clean tag and a firm tie. He reads it, not because he has forgotten, but because checking is cheaper than guessing. The pencil mark is clear. The kind of seed is known. The expected screen is already in place. A run like this can begin smoothly if the worker remains attentive through the ease. He opens the sack and feeds the hopper. The seed comes willingly, making a full, dry sound. The screen accepts it without protest. The clean stream begins almost at once, steady and pleasing. The bolter samples, sees little trouble, and lets the machine continue. His hands rest briefly on the rail, fingers curved, dust gathered near the knuckles. This is one of the longer, easy runs, the sort that allows the mind to move lightly while the body stays present. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter may think of supper, weather, a bill, a conversation, or nothing in particular, yet his attention remains tethered to the machine. If the sound changes, he will hear it. If the stream thins, he will see it. Routine gives the mind a little room without abandoning the work. We stay with the sound. The screen trembles. The seed falls. The spouts murmur their separate paths. A light draft moves across the back of the neck. Dust softens the window. Somewhere below, a shoe scrapes and a man clears his throat. These small sounds layer gently, making the room feel inhabited but never crowded. A long, easy run can be hypnotic. You watch the same motion continue and continue, the seed crossing, dividing, falling, gathering. There is no need for the mind to reach ahead. The next moment will resemble this one closely enough to be trusted and differ just enough to keep the bolter's quiet attention alive. Perhaps that is part of why such work belongs so naturally to a sleep story. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter lives in the borderland between alertness and repetition. He cannot drift completely, but he does not need excitement. He stays with the task in a low, even way, and we borrow that steadiness for rest. As the sack fills gradually, the afternoon seems to lengthen rather than hurry. The clean seed rises inside the sack in a slow mound, then settles as more falls. The bolter nudges the sides to help it distribute evenly. Burlap bulges, relaxes, and bulges again. You can hear the difference as the sack fills, the hollow bottom sound becoming deeper and more muffled. He knows when to prepare the tie before the top grows awkward. He reduces the flow near the end because the last measure often decides whether a sack is easy to handle. Too full, and tying becomes a struggle. Too low, and the weight is wrong. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter brings the run down gently, letting the final seed fall where it belongs. He folds the top and ties it with the same dependable knot. The sack is moved to the row, and its place opens beside another. Rows matter in a seed mill. They keep promises visible. Finished here, waiting there. Hold aside. Run again. Send out. Each position speaks to the workers who understand it. The bolter's placement is another kind of writing, done in weight and space rather than ink. He sweeps a small crescent of seed near the hopper, gathering what spilled during the pour. The broom bristles rasp over the boards. A few seeds roll away and are followed. He does not chase every speck beyond reason, but he does not leave a visible spill. Again, proportion. Again, care measured by use. The room is warm now, but not oppressive. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter takes a drink, then wipes the cup and sets it back. His throat may still taste dust. His ears may carry the machine's hum even in the brief pause. You can feel how work enters every sense and leaves none untouched. And as the day's row of finished sacks grows longer, we begin to notice the quiet mathematics of labor. The bolter's day can be counted in weights, sacks, lots, screen changes, samples and sweepings, but none of those counts fully describes the labor. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter also spends attention, judgment, patience, and bodily strength. These cannot be entered neatly beside a number. They show in the fact that the work is done without confusion. A ledger might show that so many sacks came in and so many went out. It might show charges, names, and dates. But the ledger does not show the difficult lot that ran slow, the screen brushed again and again, or the moment a damp smell changed the plan. It does not show the bolter waiting a few extra breaths before deciding that a second pass was needed. You can imagine a later reader finding the business record and missing the worker entirely. The numbers remain, but the room has vanished. The dust is gone. The smell is gone. The vibration is gone. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's body, which translated raw material into those neat entries, is nowhere on the page. This is how ordinary labor becomes pale in memory. Yet the absence can itself guide us back. If a record shows clean seed sold, someone cleaned it. If sacks moved, someone lifted them. If lots stayed separate, someone checked the tags. If machinery ran daily, someone listened to it. We do not need a carved name to know there was a worker in the upper room keeping the process whole. The machine begins again, and the thought fades back into sound. That is proper. The bolter would not stand long in reflection while seed waited in the hopper. He would return to the run, because work is remembered best by re-entering its rhythm. And so we re-enter it with him, letting the next hour unfold through familiar hands. The next hour is made of moderate work, neither easy nor hard. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter changes one screen, runs two smaller lots, and clears the waste before it mounds too high. You feel the ordinary alternation of effort and watching. Lift, wait, brush, sample, tie, carry. The sequence remains simple from a distance and full of detail up close. A small stone appears in the screenings box, smooth and pale, no bigger than a bean. He picks it out and drops it into a separate tin or onto the waste pile. It makes a sharp click. Such things matter because stone among seed can damage equipment later, or simply offend the expectation of a clean lot. The bolter notices because noticing is his trade. A bit of wire appears too, perhaps from a sack closure or field debris. He removes it carefully. Metal does not belong in the stream. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter's hands are cautious around it, and the object is set aside. The seed continues, indifferent to what has been removed. The clean sack receives what should remain, and the hidden hazard disappears from the future. This is another invisible success. No one later will thank him for the stone that did not travel, the wire that did not tear a sack, the mixed seed that did not happen. But we can see these absences forming around his care. They are like clear spaces on the floor after sweeping, defined by what is no longer there. The sound of the machine seems especially even after the small interruptions. A calm run follows. The bolter stands near the rail, one hand resting lightly, the other ready. Dust shifts along the window ledge. The city outside lowers its tone as evening approaches. We remain with the slow passage because nothing more forceful is needed for company. As evening draws nearer, the final part of this working day begins to arrange itself. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter checks which lot can be left safely and which must be finished. He reads the remaining tags with tired but careful eyes. A sack meant for morning is moved away from the hopper. Another small one is brought forward for the last run. The decision is quiet, but it shapes the closing. A good ending begins before the machine stops. The final small lot opens cleanly. The seed inside smells dry and sound. He feeds it at a moderate pace, letting the machine finish the day without strain. The screen shakes, the spouts murmur, and the sack fills. You can feel the room leaning towards stillness while still working. It is a pleasant in-between, like the last light before lamps are fully needed. The bolter samples once, finds the run acceptable, and lets it proceed. His hands move with the slight heaviness of late day. The brush still lands accurately. The gate still answers. The tag is still checked. Fatigue slows him, but habit keeps him reliable. We have seen this before, and the repetition makes the scene softer rather than less clear. A smell of supper from somewhere beyond the mill might drift in faintly, or perhaps that is only imagination joining the evening air. More certainly, there is coal smoke, damp brick, and the dusty warmth of the room. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter hears a door close below. He knows the office day is almost done. His own day will end only after the machine and room are settled. The last clean seed falls. The stream narrows. The hopper empties. The screen carries the final pieces across and releases them. For a few moments, the sound becomes delicate, almost sparse, seed by seed, tap by tap. The bolter waits for the machine to finish speaking before he turns it towards silence. And as silence gathers again, the familiar evening care returns with the softness of a repeated prayer. He stops the motion, listens to the belts slow, and lets the room become itself without vibration. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter does not rush into sweeping, while parts are still moving. He waits, then opens the panel, brushes the screen, clears the spouts, and empties the waste. The evening sequence arrives in the same order, and we follow without needing to be told where each motion leads. Dust is drawn into a pile, the broom's handle rests against his palm, the boards show temporary dark lines where the sweep has passed. A few seeds roll from under the machine and are gathered. The rag wipes a rail. The oil can is checked, but not used where it is not needed. The room becomes ready by degrees, not by one grand act. He folds the empty sacks, stacks the sound ones, sets aside the torn one, and carries the filled sacks to their place. Each sack lands with a subdued thump. Tags are turned outward. The row stands steady. You sense the relief of visible order after a day spent managing flow, dust, and motion. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter has made a room that can sleep. Downstairs, the light may already be lower. A clerk's lamp glows through the stairwell. The front door is locked, or nearly so. The street outside is darkening. The upper room holds the last gold of day along the window edge, and dust settles through it slowly, as if reluctant to reach the floor. The bolter takes his last look around. Hopper covered, screen clear, brush placed, tags safe, sacks ordered, waste removed, floor passable. These are simple assurances, but they carry the full weight of his responsibility. He gathers his coat and lunch pail, if he has one, and the day gathers with him in silence. Then the stairs receive his tired steps, and the upper room waits for another morning's dust, seed, and steady human care. The following morning does not begin with drama, only with the key, the door, the stair, and the faint smell of yesterday held inside the mill. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter enters the upper room and finds it ready because he left it ready. You can feel the quiet satisfaction of that. No surprise greets him except weather, and weather is expected to have its moods. He sets down his things, touches the machine, and reads the first tag. The work begins again, but our attention has changed. We now know the meaning of each small motion. The screen chosen from the rack is not just a screen. The first pour is not just a pour. The broom in the corner is not just a broom. Each object has become part of a living pattern. The first seed of the morning drops through the hopper, and the sound wakes the room in layers. The motor hum deepens. The frame shakes. The spouts begin. Dust lifts from the corners and enters the light. The Peoria Seed Mill Bolter stands where he always stands, and we stand with him, hearing again the steady division between what will be kept and what will be carried away. A good lot runs early. perhaps by luck or by planning. The clean stream is full, the waste modest, the screen easy to keep clear. The bolter checks anyway. He does not let ease make him careless. Ease is simply another condition to tend properly. You can sense the calm confidence in his posture, the way his body trusts the process without abandoning attention. The city wakes beyond the window. Peoria's sounds gather slowly. One engine, one voice, one door, one distant train at a time. Inside, seed falls with the same patient note. The room belongs to both the town and the field, both commerce and soil, both machine in hand. The bolter stands at their meeting point, dusty and almost unseen. And as the morning lengthens, another customer's lot waits by the wall, carrying its own small weather into the room.